red-hot stone was pounding in his chest. Someone else's heart. 7 days later, it climbed down from the fence. It jumped down and said it was tired of watching its owner eat porridge instead of training. Its own strength had left him. It had grown stronger without him, and it returned only because it couldn't survive without his body. But first, he had to live through 7 more days. Fast forward back. The first thing Ethan feels is the cold of the earth beneath his bare knees. He opens his eyes and sees grass, wet, black at the edges. Around him, a smooth circle 3 meters in diameter has been scorched. Inside, the grass is dead. Outside, it's green. And he's kneeling right in the center. He's wearing someone else's linen shirt. It smells of smoke and sourness. Ethan tilts his head back toward the sky, and the sky isn't right. 2 discs hang above the horizon. One is white, the other has a blue tinge. 2 moons. He blinks. The moons don't disappear. A burning heat in his chest, as if a red-hot stone the size of a fist had been placed between his ribs. There's no pain, just pressure, just the pulse of a second heart, one he'd never had since birth. Ethan looks down and sees the old man. The body lies face down 2 steps away. A hand reaches toward the center of the circle, toward him. The fingernails are broken down to the flesh. Something thicker than blood has spread beneath the body. The old man is dead. It's clear at once. The living don't lie like that. Ethan struggles to stand. His legs give way. He falls onto his side. He gets up on the second try. He sways. He steadies himself. All around is a grove. Trees with white bark and silver leaves. Not a single familiar face. The birds are singing too low, as if pigeons had started singing in bass. Ethan turns the old man over. His face is gaunt. His beard reaches his chest. His eyes are open. His pupils are white, completely white. No wounds, no burns. The old man burned from the inside out, like a wick. Ethan looks at his hands, clean, unharmed. He touches his chest where it's hot. The skin is normal, but inside, it's buzzing. He sits like that for about 5 minutes. Then he utters a single word. "All right." And he starts digging, with his hands. The earth crumbles like ash. Ethan buries himself up to his elbow. He moves the old man into the hole, covers him up, places a stone on top. Not because he knew him, but because there's no one else. He wipes his hands on his shirt and leaves the grove. He walks barefoot along a path that's too smooth, past trees that are too tall. Everything is almost normal, but every detail is shifted by half a degree. The flowers smell stronger. The air is thicker. The shadows fall in the wrong places. Half an hour later, he comes out onto the road, a real one, with ruts from wheels, with hoof prints. Civilization. Ethan turns right, because to the left is the hill. The heat in his chest won't subside. It pulses steadily, like a second breath. Ethan tries not to think, because if he starts thinking, he'll have to admit that he's dead, that his apartment in Seattle burned down, that the laptop on his chest overheated, that the old wiring couldn't handle it, that he fell asleep and didn't wake up. But he woke up here, on his knees, next to a corpse, under 2 moons. No, better to keep going. Around the bend lies a village, 20 farmsteads, thatched roofs, smoke from the chimneys, the smell of manure and fresh bread, and people, alive. A woman is hauling buckets on a yoke. A man is repairing a fence. 2 children are chasing a dog. Ethan approaches the first house and realizes he doesn't know the language. And then he immediately realizes that he does. The words come on their own, as if someone had loaded them into his head while he was kneeling in that circle. He asks where to find food and a place to stay. The woman nods toward a large house with a mug on the sign. Inside, it smells of beer and roasted meat. Behind the bar is a fat man with a red face and kind eyes. Ethan sits down and honestly that he has nothing, no money, no belongings, that he's lost his way and has come from far away. The fat man looks at his bare feet and his shirt, caked in dirt and ash. He sets a beer and some porridge in front of him. He says they pay a penny a day for farm work, and that the hayloft is free. Ethan eats. He drinks. He climbs up into the hayloft. The heat in his chest pulses steadily, as if it were alive. And for the first time that day, Ethan forms a complete thought. I'll take a look around for a week. Then I'll figure things out. He passes out in 30 seconds. The week drags on. Ethan hauls sacks on a farm owned by a man named Garrett. He cleans the stalls, carries water, gets a penny and 2 bowls a day, sleeps on hay. The heat in his chest doesn't bother him. It's just there. He gets used to it on the 2nd day. By the 3rd day, he stops noticing it. By the 5th, he thinks maybe this is his life now. The farm, porridge, the hayloft, 2 moons, and it's not so bad. The village is called Willowbrook. The world is called Aerin, and here, everyone's gift awakens at age 7. A life force inside the body, like a muscle you've been building up for years. The gift grants abilities. To some, fire. To others, speed. To others still, hands that mend what's broken. And gifts always obey their masters. Always. Without exception. That's just how it is. Ethan listens and nods. And he keeps quiet about the fact that something lives inside his chest, something that pulses all too much on its own. On the 7th day, he wakes up from the cold. The same cold as the first time. It's dark in the hayloft. He looks at his chest. There's no heat. For the first time in 7 days, it feels empty inside. Cold, as if someone had pulled out the battery. Ethan sits up, and he sees him. A young man is standing by the wall, translucent, tall, thin. His hair is the color of ash. His eyes are gray, cold. He stands with his arms crossed, looking down at Ethan. Handsome. The kind of beauty that repels rather than attracts. Ethan opens his mouth. The young man clicks his tongue, turns around, and walks through the wall, into the night. Ethan sits and stares at the wall through which his chest battery has just vanished. In the morning, the warmth doesn't return, nor the next day, nor 3 days later. His chest feels empty and cold, like a house from which the tenant has moved out. On the 5th day, he begins to worry, not because he needs the power, but because he's grown accustomed to it, to the warmth, to the pulse, to the fact that he isn't alone in his own body. On the 7th day, he steps out of the hayloft and sees him again. The young man is sitting on the fence, no longer transparent, almost solid. He's wearing black armor that wasn't there a week ago, gauntlets, a breastplate, all battered. All of it is scratched. On his cheekbone is a fresh cut that's already starting to heal, and the young man is eating an apple. Ethan freezes. The young man finishes chewing. He jumps down from the fence and speaks. His voice is low, with a lazy contempt that he doesn't even try to hide. His name is Cyrus. He is Ethan's gift. He left his body a week ago because he couldn't stand watching his host munch on porridge and snooze on hay instead of training. Over the course of that week, he found a mountain hermit, defeated him, learned 3 combat techniques, raised his level by 100 points, and returned. Because without Ethan's body, he can't survive. And if it weren't for that annoying little he wouldn't have come back at all. Ethan listens and asks just one thing. What does level mean? Cyrus looks at him the way a top student would look at someone who asked what a fraction is, and he explains. The power of the gift is measured in levels here. An ordinary gift user reaches the 10th level after a year of training, the 30th after 5 years. The elite reach the 100th by the age of 40. Cyrus reached the 100th in a week, on his own, without a master. Ethan nods and asks if he can finish cleaning the stall. Cyrus looks at him, then at the stall, then back at him. And for the first time, what appears on Dar's face isn't contempt. It's disappointment. Pure, deep, personal. Like that of an older brother who's returned from war and sees that his younger brother still hasn't cleaned his room. Cyrus says nothing. He turns away and slips back into Ethan's chest. The heat returns, but now it's different, heavier, more vicious, as if a small volcano had taken up residence inside him, not a little flame, and it really, really disliked its host. The next 3 days passed in silence. Cyrus sat inside. Ethan could feel him, heavy, hot, discontented, like a cat locked in a room against its will. Ethan hauled sacks around the farm. Cyrus was silent. Ethan cleaned the stalls. Cyrus was silent. Ethan ate his porridge. Cyrus was silent, but the heat in his chest grew slightly hotter. It was as if Dar physically couldn't stand the sight of yet another bowl of porridge. On the 4th day after Cyrus's return to the village, a knight rode in. Ethan was standing on the main street, carrying 2 buckets of water from the well to the farm. The knight was riding a horse that was larger than any horse Ethan had seen in his past life. The knight's armor gleamed. A full set: breastplate, shoulder guards, vambraces, greaves, and a helmet tucked under his arm. A 2-handed sword hung at his back. On his chest was a coat of arms, a blue shield with a golden feather. The knight rode down the center of the street, waiting for everyone to step aside. Everyone stepped aside, except Ethan. Ethan simply hadn't noticed. He was thinking about how the second bucket was leaking, and that he'd have at most 1.5 buckets worth left by the time he reached the farm. The knight stopped his horse. He looked down. Ethan looked up. The knight told the peasant to get out of the way. Ethan looked around. The street was wide. There was plenty of room. But the knight didn't want space. The knight wanted obedience. Ethan said he'd move out of the way in a second. The knight dismounted. He was a head taller than Ethan. His armor made him look 2 heads wider. He placed his hand on Ethan's shoulder and pressed down. Ethan dropped to 1 knee. The buckets tipped over. Water spilled across the ground. 1.5 buckets. He'd carried them for nothing. The knight said the boy needed to know his place, and that if he had the gift, let him show it, and if not, let him crawl. Ethan felt a heat, not in his chest. The heat had left him. Cyrus appeared behind the knight's back, quietly, without a sound, without a flash. He simply was there. A translucent young man with ash-colored hair. No one noticed him. The knight continued to press down on Ethan's shoulder. He was saying something about honor and how peasants should respect the nobility. Cyrus stood behind him and watched. Then he reached out and unfastened the top strap of the armor. Quietly, carefully, like a surgeon. The knight didn't feel a thing. He was too busy speaking. Cyrus unfastened the second strap, the third, the side fasteners on the breastplate, the shoulder strap buckles. Ethan saw it. The knight didn't. People on the street began to notice. Someone pointed. Someone covered their mouth with their hand. Cyrus worked methodically, from top to bottom, every strap, every clasp, every fastener. Last, he unfastened the belt from which the sword hung. The belt slipped off. The sword fell into the mud. The knight heard the sound. He looked down and took a step. His armor crumbled. His breastplate slid forward. His shoulder guards fell off. His greaves came apart. The knight stood in the middle of the street in his undershirt. Pieces of metal lay scattered around him. 10 seconds of silence. Then someone laughed. Then everyone laughed. The knight blushed. Then he turned pale. Then he began looking around for an enemy. Ethan stood up. He brushed off his knee. He said in a calm voice that he was sorry, that his gift sometimes played tricks on him, that he would definitely talk to it. The knight looked at Cyrus. Cyrus was standing 3 paces away. His arms were crossed. His expression was one of utter indifference. The knight gathered his armor, mounted his horse, rode away, without looking back. The village laughed for another hour. Cyrus told Ethan that if he'd listened to him, he wouldn't have been on his knees. Ethan said thank you. Cyrus demanded he say it louder. Ethan said, "Thank you, Cyrus." Then the gift retreated back into his chest. The heat grew slightly milder, just a tiny bit. That evening, Ethan was sitting in the tavern. The fat man behind the bar bought him a free beer. He said he hadn't laughed like that in a long time. A man with a serious expression sat down next to him. He introduced himself as Alden, the village elder of Willowbrook. Alden said that the knight was from Baron Cross's retinue, that Baron Cross owns these lands, that the knight would return and tell the Baron there's a guy in the village with a gift who can unbuckle armor. Alden said that might be a problem. Ethan asked how big a problem. Alden said that Baron Cross was gathering powerful, gifted people for his retinue, sometimes voluntarily, sometimes not. Ethan finished his beer. He thanked him for the warning. He went to the hayloft. He lay down. And for the first time, he really talked to Cyrus. Not out loud, inside. He thought of a question, and the heat in his chest responded. Not with words, with images. Ethan asked why Cyrus had done it, why he'd drawn attention to himself. The answer came as a picture. Ethan on his knees, water in the mud, the knight's hand on his shoulder. And on top of that, a feeling. Not anger, not pride, disgust. Cyrus physically couldn't bear to watch his master kneel. Not because he loved Ethan, because they were one and the same. And his master's humiliation was his own. Ethan lay there and thought about it. Then he thought that tomorrow he would have to make a decision. Then he fell asleep. In the morning, a girl was standing in front of the hayloft. She was short. Her light brown hair was braided. She had freckles on her nose. She wore a simple dress and an apron covered in flour. She was holding a basket. The basket contained bread, fresh, warm, straight out of the oven. She said her name was Lina, the daughter of village head Alden, that her father had told her about yesterday, and that she thought a person with such an interesting gift needed to eat properly. Ethan took the bread. He thanked her. Lina didn't leave. She stood there and looked at him. Then she asked if it was true that his gift could act on its own. Ethan chewed the bread. It was the best bread he'd ever eaten in this world. He said it was hard to explain. Lina said she wasn't in a hurry. They sat down on a bench near the hayloft. Ethan told her the bare minimum, that his gift was unusual, that it sometimes acted on its own, that he didn't fully understand how it worked. Lina listened. She didn't interrupt. She wasn't scared. When Ethan finished, she said one thing that really struck him. She said that 80 people lived in Willowbrook. 30 of them had gifts. All 30 of them have gifts that are silent and obedient. She said it had always struck her as strange, that the life force inside you has no mind of its own. Ethan looked at her. Lina shrugged and said it was probably a silly thought. Ethan said no, not silly at all. A warmth stirred in his chest, a little warmer, a little softer. Cyrus listened. For the next 2 days, Lina brought bread every morning. On the third day, she also brought a berry pie. Ethan ate. Cyrus remained silent inside, but the warmth pulsed more steadily as Ethan ate what's something delicious. On the fourth day, Lina came not with bread, but with a question. She asked if she could see his gift. Ethan hesitated. Then he closed his eyes. He thought the request inwardly. The heat stirred. Cyrus emerged, silently. He stood next to Ethan. He crossed his arms. He looked down at Lina. Lina looked up at him. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't in awe. She looked at him as a human being. And she asked if he was hungry. Cyrus blinked. In his entire short life, people had asked him if he was strong, if he was fast, if he was obedient. No one had ever asked if he was hungry. Because the gifts don't eat. They aren't supposed to eat. They can't eat. Cyrus said that the gifts don't feel hunger. Lina said that wasn't what she'd asked. She'd asked if he wanted to try some. Silence. Cyrus held out his hand. Lina placed a piece of bread in his palm. It was warm, soft. Cyrus brought it to his mouth. He took a bite and froze. Ethan felt it through the bond. Not the taste. He would have recognized the taste. It was something else. It was a revelation. The feeling that the world had become twice as big as it was a second ago. That there's a whole layer of reality you've never had access to. Cyrus stood there with a piece of bread in his mouth. His eyes were wide open. His hands were trembling. Lina was watching him, and Tan looked at him. Cyrus finished chewing, swallowed, looked at his hands, then looked at Lina. Then he went back into Ethan's chest. Quickly, almost ran away. Ethan was sitting on a bench. A tear was running down his cheek. One, not his own. Through the connection. Lina looked at him. She asked if everything was all right. Ethan wiped his cheek. He said yes, that the bread was just very tasty. Cyrus publicly humiliated the visiting knight by unbuckling his armor. Town Elder Alden warned Ethan that this might attract the attention of Baron Cross. Lina, the town elder's daughter, began bringing Ethan food and met Cyrus. For the first time in his life, Cyrus tasted food and was overwhelmed by the new sensation. Ethan began training the next day. Not because he wanted to, but because Cyrus had emerged from his chest at 5 in the morning and stood over him. Silently, with an expression that said it all without words. Ethan opened his eyes. He saw an ash-haired young man standing with his arms crossed, looking at him the way a coach looks at a client who's missed a session for the 3rd time. Ethan said it was still dark. Cyrus said the sun would rise in 20 minutes and that there was enough time for a warm-up. And Ethan asked what kind of warm-up. Cyrus said a jog around the village to start with. Ethan asked how many laps. Cyrus said 1. The village of Willowbrook had a perimeter of about 2 kilometers. In his past life, Ethan had never run 2 kilometers even once. His gym membership had been gathering dust for 6 months. The farthest he'd ever run was the distance to the bus stop. He started running. The first 500 meters were bearable. The next 500 were rough. The last kilometer was torture. He made it. He collapsed onto the grass. He lay there, staring at the sky with its 2 moons. One was already sinking below the horizon. The other hung as a pale speck. Cyrus stood nearby, not out of breath, not sweating, because the gifted don't sweat. He looked at Ethan and said it was pathetic. Ethan said he knew. Cyrus said there would be 2 laps tomorrow. Ethan said nothing, because he didn't have the breath to argue. After the run, Cyrus showed him the stance. The basic combat stance that children learn at the age of 7 in the gifted academies. Feet shoulder-width apart, knees slightly bent, weight on the balls of the feet, hands in front of the chest. Ethan held the stance for 10 minutes. His legs started to shake by the 3rd minute. Cyrus said he wasn't standing correctly. He corrected it. Then he corrected it again. Then once more. On the 5th try, Cyrus said he'd seen sacks of potatoes that stood straighter. Ethan said that sacks of potatoes don't feel pain in their knees. Cyrus said that was Ethan's only advantage over a sack. They trained for 2 hours. Then Ethan went to the farm. He worked all day. In the evening, he barely made it to the hayloft. In the morning, Cyrus was standing over him again at 5 o'clock. 2 rounds. Stance for 20 minutes. Then strikes. Basic strikes. Straight. Side. From above. From below. Cyrus demonstrated. Ethan repeated. Poorly. Slowly. Off-center. Cyrus corrected him. Patiently. Surprisingly patiently. As if hidden inside this arrogant young man was a true mentor who simply didn't know how to be kind. On the 3rd day of training, Lina joined them. Not to train, just to watch. She'd come with some bread. She'd sit on the bench. She'd watch as Ethan tried to punch the air without falling over. Cyrus tolerated her presence. More than that, when Lina was around, he corrected Ethan a little more gently. On the 4th day, Lina asked if she could learn the stance too. Cyrus looked at her, then at Ethan. Ethan shrugged. Cyrus demonstrated the stance. Cyrus said that was exactly what he'd expected. A week of training passed. Ethan ran 3 laps. He held a plank for 30 minutes. He punched the air 100 times. Every day, without missing a day. For the first time in his life, he was doing something every day without missing a day. In his past life, the longest streak without a miss was 3 days in a row at the gym. On the 4th day, he decided he deserved a day off. That day off stretched into a month. Here, there were no days off, because Cyrus was standing over him every morning, and because it's impossible to run away from your own gift. It lives in your chest. On the 10th day of training, 2 things happened. First, Ethan landed a punch correctly for the first time. Really right. A straight punch from a stance, shifting his weight from his back foot to his front foot. His fist moved smoothly. His torso rotated through the punch. The power flowed from the ground through his legs, through his hips, through his back, into his arm. One punch. Clean. Cyrus didn't say a word. He just nodded. Once. A brief nod. And Ethan felt, through their bond, a wave he'd never felt before from the gift. Not approval. Not praise. Relief. As if Cyrus had been waiting for that punch for 10 days and had finally let out a breath. The second thing happened that evening. Ethan was sitting in the tavern. He was eating the stew that Fat Bren cooked on Wednesdays. The door opened. A woman walked in. Tall, thin, shoulder-length black hair, dark leather clothes laced with straps, 2 short blades on her left hip. On her right was a bag containing something that jingled. She was limping. The leg of her pants on her left leg was wet. A dark stain was spreading down from her knee. She sat down at a table. She ordered water. When Bren brought the mug, she took it with both hands. Her hands were shaking. Ethan chewed his stew and watched. The woman drank the water. She stood up. She staggered. She grabbed the table for support. She stood up again. She walked toward the door. On her third step, her left leg buckled and she fell. Ethan stood up from the table. He walked over. He crouched down beside her. He asked if she needed help. The woman looked at him with eyes that were both angry and weary. She said she didn't need any. She tried to stand up. She couldn't. She said maybe she did need some. Ethan helped her sit back down. Bren brought more water. Ethan asked for a clean rag. The woman said she could handle it herself. Ethan said he could see she was trying to handle it herself, and that her own blood was dripping onto the floor. The woman looked down. She looked at the pool of blood under her chair. She said, "All right." Ethan rolled up her pant leg. The wound ran from her knee to the middle of her shin. Deep, ragged, like from claws. 3 parallel marks. Ethan wasn't a doctor, but he knew how to Google things, and in a past life he'd once stitched up his own finger after cutting himself in the kitchen, following a YouTube video. He rinsed the wound with water, bandaged it with a rag, tightly. The woman didn't make a sound, only her jaw clenched. Ethan asked what had injured her. She said it was a swamp monitor lizard, 2 hours ago, in the forest west of the village. Ethan asked if she was a hunter. She said yes, a bounty hunter who hunts monsters. She works alone. Her name is Sora Min. She fell silent after that. Ethan ordered her some stew. She ate it in silence. Then she looked at Ethan and said she had no money. Ethan said the stew cost 2 copper coins and that he'd survive. Sora said she doesn't take handouts. Ethan said it wasn't a handout but an investment, that the village needed someone to kill the swamp monitor lizards. Sora looked at him for a long time. Then she said she needed a place to stay for a couple of days, until her leg healed. Ethan offered the hayloft. She accepted. That night, Ethan lay at one end of the hayloft, Sora at the other. Silence between them. Cyrus stirred inside, a warm wave through the bond. Not a thought, a sensation. Ethan didn't realize right away what it was. Then he understood. Curiosity. Cyrus was curious. Not about Sora, about her emptiness. Ethan could feel it through the bond. Something was wrong inside Sora, not like with ordinary people, not like with people without the gift. She had a place for the gift. She had. And it was empty, like a house after a fire. The walls are still standing, but there's nothing inside. Cyrus sensed this and remained silent. In the morning, Ethan trained as usual. 3 laps, stance, strikes. Sora sat by the hayloft and watched. When Ethan finished, she said one sentence. She said his stance had improved while she'd been watching. Ethan thanked her. Sora said she was still bad, but better than she'd been an hour ago. Cyrus stepped out from behind her. He stood next to Ethan. Sora looked at him, without fear, without surprise. She looked at Cyrus as a fighter, appraisingly, professionally. Then she said his stance was perfect. Cyrus looked at her, and for the first time in front of a stranger, he didn't cross his arms. He just stood there, openly, without a defensive posture. Sora looked at Dar, who was standing apart from his master and acting as if he were alive, and she didn't ask a single question. Not because she didn't care, but because she was a hunter. Hunters don't ask why a beast is behaving unusually. They observe, they remember, they draw conclusions. Sora stayed in Willowbrook for 2 days, then 3, then for 5. Her leg was healing slowly. She helped out on the farm wherever she could. With one hand, she did more than Ethan could with 2. In the evenings, she sat in the tavern. She said nothing. She drank water. On the 6th day, she went into the forest. Ethan didn't ask why. She returned 4 hours later, with the carcass of a swamp monitor lizard on her shoulders. She tossed it down in front of the tavern. She told Bren that this was what 6 days' worth of stew looked like. Bren looked at the carcass. He looked at Sora. He looked at her leg, which was still limping. He didn't argue. Sora stayed. Not because she decided to stay, but because she hadn't decided to leave. There's a difference. Ethan understood her. That's how he ended up in Willowbrook himself. Cyrus began daily training sessions with Ethan at 5 in the morning. For the first time in his life, Ethan trained without missing a single session and landed his first proper blow. A wounded mercenary hunter, Sora Min, arrived in the village. Ethan tended to her wound and offered her a place to stay for the night. Cyrus sensed that Sora had an empty, a deep void left by the late Dar. Sora stayed in Willowbrook. The month passed like one long day. Ethan trained, every morning, without missing a single session. His run increased from 3 laps to 5. His stance training went from 30 minutes to an hour. His strikes went from 100 to 300. Cyrus added new exercises, dodges, blocks, footwork. Ethan moved like a wooden puppet. Cyrus moved like the wind. The difference was so great that it was ridiculous to even compare them. But Ethan didn't stop anymore. Something inside him had broken, or perhaps, on the contrary, it had been mended. In his past life, he'd always waited for the right moment, the right mood, the right Monday. Here, there were no Mondays. Here, there was Cyrus at 5 in the morning, and the choice was simple: get up or look into the gray eyes of Dar, who despised him a little more with every missed session. Ethan got up. His body was changing, slowly. His hands had grown tougher from working on the farm. His legs had grown stronger from running. His stomach, which in his past life had begun to show signs of softness, had become flat. Ethan noticed this when he tightened his belt 2 notches. Sora trained him in the evenings, separately from Cyrus. Her method was different. Cyrus taught form. Sora taught survival. She put Ethan in situations: an attack from behind, a low blow, a throw while falling. Her instructions were brief. Do it this way. Don't do it that way. No. Again. Better. No. Again. She didn't praise him, but when Ethan did something right, she'd give a slight nod. And that nod was worth more than any praise. Because Sora Min didn't nod just for the sake of it. Lina came every day, with bread, with pies, with berries, once with a whole pot of soup. She sat on a bench and watched the training sessions. She chatted with Ethan when he was resting. She stayed silent when he was working. She asked his opinion on things, about the weather, about whether it was worth repairing the barn roof before fall, about whether bread tasted better with or without caraway seeds. Ethan answered. And every time, he saw something in Lina's face relax, as if the very fact that someone was asking for her opinion and then actually listening to her answer was something she wasn't used to. One evening, Ethan asked Lina why she came every day. Lina paused. Then she said she was curious, that she'd lived her whole life in Willowbrook, that she'd been groomed to marry a farmer from the neighboring village, that no one had ever asked her what she wanted, and that when Ethan asked her opinion about bread with caraway, It's strange. But in a good way. Ethan said the caraway bread was better. Lina smiled. Cyrus remained silent inside, but the heat grew warmer. Not hotter, warmer. There is a difference. In the third week, Sora told him. Not because she wanted to, because Ethan asked. He asked why she fought alone. Monster hunters always have the gift. It's a basic requirement of the guild. Without a gift, they won't hire you. Without a gift, you're not a hunter. You're meat. Sora sat on a bench that evening, cleaning her blades. Her hands moved automatically. She said she used to have a gift. 3 years ago. A fire gift. Fast. Strong. They'd worked together for 5 years. Sora said he'd died. In a battle with a mountain chimera. The chimera was too strong. The gift shielded Sora with its body, took the blow, disintegrated. The space inside remained empty, forever. Sora said that when your gift dies, it feels as if an organ has been ripped out of you. Not your heart, something bigger. Something that had been a part of you since you were 7. And then you walk and breathe and eat, but inside there's a hole, and the hole doesn't heal. Ethan listened. He didn't interrupt. When Sora finished, he was silent for a moment. Then he said one thing. He said that Cyrus could fight in Dar's place. Not always, not forever, but when Sora needed a partner in battle, he could step in and stand by her side. Not out of pity, as a favor between partners. Sora stopped polishing her blade. She looked at Ethan. Her face hadn't changed. Her eyes had changed. Something in them had cracked, subtly, like ice on a puddle in early spring. She said she'd think about it. Then she stood up and left. Ethan heard her coughing behind the hayloft. Not from illness, something else. Cyrus stirred inside. A warm wave. Not approval, consent. He was ready. The next day, Sora came in the morning. She stood next to Ethan during training. She looked at Cyrus, who had come out to warm up. She said she accepted the offer. She said it calmly, professionally, as if it were a contract. Cyrus nodded, just as professionally. 2 fighters, 1 agreement. Ethan stood between them and sensed that something important had just happened. He didn't fully understand what, but the heat in his chest pulsed steadily and calmly, as if Cyrus were satisfied, truly satisfied, for the first time ever. The month was drawing to a close. Ethan was no longer gasping for breath after 5 rounds. His punches were still slow, but they were on target. The stance had become second nature. His body remembered even when his mind grew tired. Cyrus no longer said that Ethan was worse than a sack of potatoes. Now he said that Ethan was on par with a sack of potatoes. Progress. One night, Ethan woke up to a sensation not his own. Through the bond, Cyrus, inside his chest, was having a dream. Ethan didn't know that the gifts could have dreams. Apparently Cyrus didn't know either because there was confusion flowing through the bond. Fear, surprise, and something old, something that didn't belong to their shared history. Ethan lay still. He didn't move. He let the bond flow, and he saw, not clearly, in fragments, a face, young, male, dark hair, a gold clasp on the collar, a smile, then a scream, then darkness, then nothing. Cyrus flinched inside. Heat flared sharply, like a burn. Ethan clenched his teeth. He took a deep breath. The heat subsided. Cyrus fell silent, deeply, completely, as if he'd cowered in a corner and shut himself off. Ethan lay in the darkness and thought. A face, a golden clasp, a scream. It wasn't his dream. It was Cyrus's dream. And in that dream was someone Cyrus had known before Ethan. Ethan asked himself the question inwardly. Who was it? There was no answer, only cold. Cyrus had shut himself off and wouldn't answer. Ethan didn't press the issue. He rolled onto his side, closed his eyes, and thought that his Dar had a past he didn't want to remember. In the morning, Cyrus acted as usual. He went out at 5, folded his arms, looked down at Ethan. Ethan stood up. He ran off. He didn't ask anything. Some things don't need to be asked. They'll come on their own when they're ready. Ethan trained for a whole month without missing a single session. His body began to change. Sora told him that her gift had died 3 years ago and that there was an empty space inside her. Ethan suggested that Cyrus fight in her gift's place sometimes. Sora agreed. That night, through the link, Ethan caught a glimpse of a fragment of Cyrus's dream featuring the face of an unknown young man with a gold clasp. Cyrus shut himself off and refused to answer questions about his past. Toward the end of the 5th week, a merchant arrived in Willowbrook. Short, heavy-set, well-dressed. Too well-dressed for a merchant who travels from village to village. A silk shirt under his traveling cloak, leather boots with silver buckles, a ring on his little finger, a signet ring with a blue stone. He brought a wagon loaded with fabrics and spices. He laid out his wares in the square in front of the tavern. He traded for 2 days. He set his prices low, too low. Ethan noticed this on the 2nd day. The fabric he was selling cost 3 times less than what had been brought here before. Ethan knew this because Bren complained about the prices of the fabrics every evening. It was his favorite topic. The merchant talked a lot, with Bren, with Garrett, with Alden. He asked questions, lots of questions, about the villagers, about the harvest, about who in the village had the gift, and about any unusual events that had happened recently. Alden answered tersely. Bren chatted freely. Ethan sat in a corner of the tavern and listened. On the 2nd evening, the merchant sat down next to him. He introduced himself as Declan. He said he was traveling through the southern villages, buying and selling. He asked Ethan where he was from. Ethan said he was from far away. Declan asked if Ethan had the gift. Ethan said it was small, weak, nothing interesting. Declan smiled. He said he'd heard the story about the knight and the armor, that the whole county was talking about it, that it was a very amusing story, very unusual. Ethan looked at him. Declan kept smiling. His eyes weren't smiling. Ethan said it was just a trick, that his gift could untie knots and unfasten clasps, a useless ability, good for nothing but a laugh. Declan nodded. He said he understood. He finished his wine. He wished Ethan a good evening. He left. Ethan stayed behind. The heat in his chest pulsed erratically. Cyrus was tense. A single word was coming through the link. Ethan didn't hear it as a word. He felt it as pressure in his temples. Danger. Ethan left the tavern. He found Sora. She was sitting behind the hayloft, sharpening blades. Ethan sat down beside her. He asked what she thought of the merchant. Sora said his hands weren't those of a merchant. Merchants have calluses from reins and quills. This one has calluses from a hilt. She also said he wore a ring on his left pinky finger. In the southern provinces of Hallan, a ring on the pinky finger is a sign of membership in one of 3 organizations. The trade guild wears it on the right. The church wears it on the ring finger. People of the Inquisition wear it on the left pinky. Ethan was silent for a moment. Then he asked what the Inquisition was. Sora explained briefly. The Inquisition is a branch of the church that deals with the gifts. Officially, they investigate anomalies. Not unofficially, they confiscate gifts that behave improperly. Confiscate means extracting them from the host's body. The procedure is painful. For the gift, it's fatal. The host usually survives. Usually. Ethan asked what counts as improper behavior. Sora said it's a gift that acts without the host's command. A gift that speaks. A gift that leaves the body on its own. A gift that eats bread. Ethan looked at her. Sora looked at him. A wordless understanding passed between them. Everything Cyrus did every day was exactly what the Inquisition used to dismember gifts for. Ethan asked what to do. Sora said that, for starters, the merchant must not see Cyrus. Nothing out of the ordinary. No astral projections. No conversations. Ethan had to be boring, ordinary, uninteresting. Ethan nodded. He went to the hayloft. He lay down. He told Cyrus through their link that he had to be silent. Hide. Don't come out. The response came in a wave. Not agreement, not refusal. Irritation. Dull and heavy. Cyrus wasn't used to hiding. Cyrus didn't want to hide. But he understood. An image came through the link. the same one as after the incident with the knight. Ethan on his knees. Only now, standing next to him was someone holding a knife. And the knife wasn't pointed at Ethan. It was pointed inward. Cyrus understood that he wasn't hiding for the sake of pride. He was hiding to survive. On the third day, the merchant Declan left. Ethan watched as his wagon drove out of the village onto the eastern road. He exhaled. Cyrus relaxed inside. The heat became steady, calm. But Sora said this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. If Declan was from the Inquisition, he'd already sent a report. In a week or two, someone else would arrive. Someone more serious. Ethan asked what she suggested. Sora said one word. Leave. Ethan stood on Willowbrook Street. He looked at the tavern, at Garrett's farm, at Alden's house, from which Lina would come out every morning with a basket of bread. He'd lived here for 5 weeks. It was the longest he'd stayed in one place since his rebirth. He knew all the residents by name. Bren poured him free beer on Wednesdays. Garrett had stopped checking his work because he trusted him. The kids ran after Ethan down the street because once he'd shown them a trick with juggling apples. 4 apples. Juggling. The only useful skill from his past life. He didn't want to leave, but the heat in his chest throbbed sharply. Cyrus wanted him to. No, Cyrus didn't want to leave. Cyrus thought it was necessary. There's a difference. That evening, Ethan went to see Alden. He sat down at the table. He said that the merchant Declan was most likely a spy, that in a week or two people might arrive looking for Ethan and his gift, and that if Ethan stayed in the village, it would be a problem for everyone. Alden then listened. Then he asked where Ethan would go. Ethan said to the city, to Ainsley. It's easier to blend in there. Alden nodded. He was silent for a moment. Then he said that his brother lived in Ainsley. He ran a bookstore. If Ethan needed a place to stay during his first few days, he should say it was from Alden. Ethan thanked him. He stood up. He walked toward the door. Alden called after him. He said that Lina would be upset. Ethan stopped. He said he knew. In the morning, he packed his things. He didn't have much. A spare shirt, a leather belt, the boots Garrett had given him during his second week, a small pouch with 20 copper coins, a month's pay. He stepped out of the hayloft. Lina was standing at the entrance, holding a basket. In the basket was bread, a pie, dried meat, and a flask of water. She wasn't crying. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. She said her father had told her. Ethan said he was sorry. Lina told him not to apologize. Then she said she would go with him. Ethan looked at her. Lina looked at him. Her chin was lifted. Her hands were clenching the basket so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. But her voice didn't tremble. She said she was 20 years old, that she'd never been farther than the neighboring village, that they were going to marry her off to a man she'd seen only twice, and that if Ethan could ask her opinion about the caraway bread, then maybe he could also ask if she wanted to spend her whole life in Willowbrook. Ethan asked. Lina said no. Cyrus stirred inside. A message came through the connection that something like a smirk, an approving one. Ethan looked at Lina, looked at the basket, looked at the road leading out of the village, said, "All right." Sora was waiting at the fork in the road beyond the village, with her belongings, with her blades, with a face that showed no surprise at the sight of Lina. She said it was a 3-day walk to Ainsley, that the road went through the forest, then across a plain, then along the river, that swamp monitor lizards roamed the forest, but she knew where their territory was. They set off, the 3 of them. Ethan with a sack on his back, Lina with a basket, Sora with her blades. The heat in his chest pulsed steadily, calm. Cyrus was silent, but warmth flowed through the connection. Not approval, not joy, anticipation. Dar was waiting for something. Ethan didn't know what, but for the first time in 5 weeks, he felt he was heading in the right direction. Not toward the farm, not toward the hayloft, not toward porridge and a copper coin a day. Somewhere. Willowbrook was behind them. The road stretched ahead. Lina walked beside him, silent. Sora walked ahead, listening to the forest. Ethan walked between them, thinking that a month ago he'd been lying in the hayloft, planning to look around for a week. And now he was heading to an unfamiliar town with a huntress and the village headman's daughter. Because his own gift was too alive for this world, because someone was already looking for them, and because bread with caraway really was better. A merchant named Declan had arrived in the village, and he turned out to be a spy for the Inquisition. Sora had figured this out from his ring and his hands. Ethan learned that the Inquisition extracted and destroyed gifts that acted independently. Ethan decided to leave Willowbrook for the town of Ainsley so as not to endanger the village. Lina decided to go with him. The three set out on their journey. Alden gave them his brother's contact information in Ainsley. The journey to Ainsley took 3 days. On the first day, they walked through the forest. Sora led the way. She knew the trails. She knew where the swamp monitor lizards roamed. She knew where the poison ivy grew. She knew where to get water and where not to. Ethan followed her, thinking that without this woman, they would have gotten lost within an hour. Lina walked beside Ethan. She didn't complain. She didn't ask to stop. She walked in silence, carrying her little basket. It wasn't until the evening of the first day that Ethan noticed she was limping. He looked at her feet. Her boots were old. The soles were worn down. She surely had a blister on her heel. Ethan suggested they take a break. Sora looked up at the sky. She said there were still 2 hours until dark. Ethan said Lina needed to rest. Sora looked at Lee. Lina said she was fine. Sora looked back at Ethan. Ethan looked at Lina. Lina was looking straight ahead. Her chin was raised. Her eyes were determined. Ethan said he needed to rest himself, that his legs were aching, that he wasn't used to treks like this. Lina looked at him. She realized he was lying. She realized he was lying for her sake. She didn't argue. They sat down. Sora got the fire going in 3 minutes. Lina took out some bread and dried meat. They ate in silence. Cyrus emerged from Ethan's chest, quietly. He sat down next to the campfire. He stared at the flames. Lina held out a piece of bread to him. Cyrus took it. He took a bite. He chewed slowly. This time, there was no shock like the first time. It was something else. A habit. A small one. Fragile. A gift that gets used to eating. Sora looked at Cyrus. Without surprise. Without questions. She just looked. Then she said that her gift had never eaten. That she had never offered any food. That in the 5 years they'd been together, she'd never once asked if he was hungry. Silence. Cyrus looked at her. Then he said that most gifts don't know what they're capable of, because no one ever offers. Sora nodded. She turned away. She looked into the forest. Her back was straight. Her shoulders trembled slightly. Ethan didn't say anything. Some things need to be endured in silence. At night, they took turns sleeping. Sora was on watch first. Ethan second. Lina wanted to take a turn too, but Sora said 3 people on watch would be enough. Lina asked who the third one was. Sora gestured with her eyes toward Ethan's chest. Cyrus isn't sleeping. Cyrus is always watching, even when Ethan drifts off. Ethan didn't know that. He asked the question inwardly. He received a short, curt reply. Cyrus said that someone had to keep watch while the master snored. Ethan said he didn't snore. Cyrus remained silent. That spoke louder than any words. The second day passed across the plain. Open space, grass up to their waists, wind, 2 moons in the dawn sky. One was fading, the other was still hanging on. Lina was walking more easily. Ethan gave her his spare leg wraps. It was a makeshift solution, but better than nothing. Sora walked ahead. She was more nervous on the plain than she had been in the forest. She said that in the open you could see far, in both directions. They could see everyone. Everyone could see them. By evening on the second day, they reached the river, wide, murky, with a current that carried branches and leaves along. A road ran along the bank, a real road, well-trodden, with ruts. They walked along the river. There were people here, carts, merchants, peasants with carts full of vegetables, soldiers on horseback. Ethan pulled his hood down. Sora stowed her blades in her bag. Lina walked beside them and looked exactly like what she was, a country girl seeing a big road for the first time. Her eyes were wide open. She looked at everything. At a cart with a cage containing a bird the size of a dog, at a merchant selling glowing stones right from his cart, at soldiers whose gifts sat on their shoulders as tiny flames. Lina asked why the soldiers' gifts were so small. Sora said they were standard military gifts, weak, identical, issued by the crown, not cultivated from childhood but artificially implanted. Ethan asked if gifts could be implanted. Sora said they could. The church knows how. They take gifts from the condemned or the dead and transplant them into soldiers. After transplantation, the gifts lose their individuality. They become tools, little flames, functions. Ethan felt a sharp twinge of heat in his chest. Abrupt, painful, like a spasm. Cyrus heard everything, and he didn't like it. By noon on the third day, they saw the walls. Ainsley was huge, much bigger than Ethan had expected. Stone walls 10 meters high, towers at the corners, a wide gate with iron doors. There was a line at the gate. Peasants, merchants, travelers. The guards were checking everyone. Not for documents, for gifts. For each person entering, the guard would place a hand on their chest. A check. Ethan joined the line. The heat in his chest pulsed rapidly. Cyrus was nervous. Ethan thought inwardly. He asked if he could hide. The answer came reluctantly. Cyrus could shrink, become quieter, smaller, show the guard not everything, but only the surface, like a person who sucks in their stomach. But if the guard was attentive, he would sense that something was wrong, Ethan thought. Then he turned to Sora. He asked if there was another entrance. Sora said there was, the river gate, for merchant boats. Security there was less strict. But they'd need a boat, or at least to look like they were coming from one. Lina said she had a basket with leftover food, that she could look like a river merchant. Sora looked at her, then at the basket, then back at Lina. And for the first time in 3 days of travel, Sora Min almost smiled. Almost. They walked around the wall. The river gate was smaller, made of wood. A single guard stood at the gate, bored, sleepy. Nearby was a dock, 3 boats, fishermen, the smell of fish and river mud. Sora approached the guard. She said they were river traders from Willowbrook. Lina showed him the basket. The guard peered inside. He saw the leftover bread and dried meat. He waved his hand. They passed through. Ethan walked past the guard. He held his breath. The guard didn't touch his chest, didn't check him, just nodded and turned away. They entered Ainsley. The town assaulted all their senses at once. Noise, smells, movement. The streets were narrow and crowded with people. Vendors were shouting. Children were running. Carts were creaking. Music was playing somewhere. People were arguing somewhere. People were laughing somewhere. The houses stood close together, 3 stories high, stone at the bottom, wood at the top, with balconies where laundry was drying, with signs for shops and workshops. Ethan stood at the intersection and looked around. He had grown up in Seattle. He knew cities. But this city was different, alive in a different way. No cars, no screens, no asphalt. Instead, with the gifted. He saw them everywhere. A small, glowing creature sat on the shoulder of a woman behind the counter, illuminating the merchandise. Flames shot from the blacksmith's hands at the end of the street, and he forged not with a hammer, but with his palms. A ball of water hovered behind a girl of about 10, and she watered the flowers on the balcony simply by turning her head. Yesri, everywhere, all around, obedient, quiet, functional. Not a single one of them spoke. Not a single one ate bread. Not a single one left to train for a week. Ethan looked down at his chest. The heat pulsed steadily. Cyrus was silent, but tension coursed through the connection. Dar looked at this city through Ethan's eyes. and he saw thousands like himself, silent, obedient, tethered. They found Olden's brother's bookstore. The store stood on a quiet street by the canal. Small, 2 stories, with a dusty sign. Inside it smelled of paper and wax. Behind the counter sat a man who looked like Olden. The same broad jaw, the same serious eyes, only slimmer and wearing glasses. His name was Corin. Ethan said he was from Olden. Corin looked at him, then at Lina, then at Sora. Then he said there were 2 rooms upstairs, small but clean, and that he knew her. She'd been here as a little girl, about 10 years ago. Lina said she remembered, that he'd given her a book of fairy tales. Corin smiled. It was the first smile Ethan had seen in this town. They went upstairs. 2 rooms, beds, real beds. Ethan sat down on the mattress. The springs creaked. He lay down, closed his eyes. The heat in his chest pulsed quietly. Cyrus was calm. For the first time in 3 days. Ethan thought he could rest for a day, maybe 2, to look around. A reply came through the link, short, dry. Training tomorrow at 5 in the morning. Ethan sighed. He fell asleep. Ethan, Sora, and Lina reached Ainsley in 3 days. On the way, Sora explained that the church knows how to transplant gifts from the dead and the condemned into soldiers, and that after the transplant, the gifts lose their identity. They bypass the checkpoint at the gate by entering through the river entrance. In the city, Ethan noticed that all the gifts were obedient and silent. They found Corin's bookstore, owned by Alden's brother, and secured a place to stay. The first week in Ainsley was quiet. Ethan trained in the mornings in the bookstore's backyard. The yard was small, 3 meters by 5, squeezed between the bookstore's wall and the wall of the neighboring house. But it was enough for sparring and strikes. Cyrus only went out into the yard, behind a closed door, with the windows curtained. He found a situation that was hard for Dar to bear. He was used to being in the spotlight, used to crossing his arms and looking down on the world. Here, he had to hide. And Cyrus was silent, but irritation came through the connection, steady, constant, like a hum in the wall. Ethan endured it. He was looking for work. Corin said the city needed loaders at the warehouses by the docks. They paid 4 copper coins a day, twice as much as on the farm. Ethan went to the docks. He hauled crates, barrels, sacks. The body that a month ago couldn't run 2 kilometers could now handle it. His back didn't give out. His hands didn't shake. His legs held up. A month of training with Cyrus and working on the farm hadn't made him a fighter, but at least a worker. Sora left town every 2 days. She came back with money. Hunting monsters in the vicinity of Ainsley was more profitable than in the village. Swamp monitor lizards, river vipers, stone beetles in the quarries outside town. The Ainsley Hunters Guild accepted contracts from anyone with a gift. Sora showed hers. Or rather, she showed the empty space where hers used to be. The old guild mark on her wrist, a tattoo shaped like a fang, that was enough. They didn't ask her where her gift was. The hunters understood. Lina got a job at a bakery 2 blocks away. The bakery owner, a woman named Doris, tasted Lina's bread and hired her on the spot. Lina baked from morning until noon. Then she brought the leftovers home. Ethan ate Lina's bread every evening. Cyrus did too. In the backyard, in the dark, quietly. They lived, a strange little family. A guy from another world, a hunter without a gift, a girl from the village, and a gift that eats bread and despises its master. On his 5th day in the city, Ethan went to Corin's bookstore. Not to buy anything, to read. He wanted to learn about the gifts, about their nature, about the rules, about the exceptions. Corin showed him a shelf. 30 books, treatises, textbooks, church writings. Ethan began to read. He read slowly. The language of this world had come to him through a ritual, the spoken language. Reading was more difficult. The letters were different, but the meaning began to emerge, like an image in murky water. The longer you look, the clearer it becomes. On the third day of reading, he found a paragraph in a treatise authored by a certain Archon Velis, written 200 years ago. The paragraph discussed instances when the gift exhibited independent behavior. Velis called this a deviation. He wrote that over the course of 300 years, 17 cases of deviation had been documented. All 17 gifts had been extracted and destroyed. All 17 hosts survived, but lost the ability to bear the gift forever. Ethan closed the book. He stared at the wall. 17. Over 300 years, and all destroyed. He thought of Cyrus, of how he ate bread, how he argued, how he trained Ethan, how he looked at the fire, how he fell asleep for the first time. The world considered all of this a disease. Ethan walked home. On the way, he stopped at the market square. It was noisy, crowded. Vendors were shouting. And amid all that noise, Ethan heard a sound. Short, sharp, the slap of a palm against skin. He turned his head. In the alley between two stalls stood a man, a large man, wearing an apron, a vendor. He was holding a girl by the wrist, a skinny girl, a dirty girl. Her hair stuck out in all directions. Her clothes were torn. She looked about 16 or 17. In her free hand, the girl held a purse, not hers. The vendor swung his arm again. The girl flinched. She couldn't break free. Ethan stopped. He watched. A surge of heat flashed through his chest. Cyrus stirred. What came through the link was neither a question nor a command, just a movement, like a cat that had heard a mouse. Ethan stepped forward. He told the merchant that was enough. The merchant looked at him. He said the thief had snatched the purse. Ethan said he could see that, and that hitting a child wasn't the answer. The merchant said it wasn't his business. Ethan said it was his business now. The merchant let the girl go. He looked down at Ethan. He was a head taller, broader in the shoulders. The mark of the gift glinted on his neck, a tiny flame beneath the skin. The merchant had the gift. Ethan didn't back down, not because he was brave, because the heat in his chest hummed steadily and confidently. Cyrus was nearby, inside her, but nearby. The dealer spat. He snatched the wallet from the girl's hand. He walked away. The girl stood in the alley. She rubbed her wrist. She looked at Ethan. Her eyes were sharp, quick, like a small animal deciding whether to run or bite. She said thank you. Her voice was hoarse, defiant. She turned and ran. After 3 steps, the heat in his chest twitched. Cyrus emerged, not from his chest, from the shadows. He appeared in front of the girl. She crashed into him. She flew backward. She fell. Cyrus stood over her, his arms crossed. He looked down at her. In his hand was a wallet, a second wallet, Ethan's wallet, the one the girl had snatched from his belt the moment he stepped in to defend her against the merchant. Ethan looked at his belt. It was empty. He looked at Cyrus. He looked at the girl. The girl was lying on the ground, staring at Cyrus, at the translucent young man standing apart from his master, holding the stolen wallet. Her mouth was open. Cyrus tossed the wallet to Ethan. Then he looked at the girl. Then he said she was fast, but not that fast. The girl stood up. She brushed herself off. She looked at Cyrus, then at Ethan, then back at Cyrus. She asked why his gift was standing apart. Ethan said it was hard to explain. The girl said she had plenty of time. Cyrus said she should eat first. The girl said she wasn't hungry. At that moment, her stomach made a sound that contradicted her words. Cyrus looked at her. He looked at Ethan. Ethan sighed. He pulled 3 coins out of his wallet. They sat down at a small diner on the corner. The girl ate the way people eat when they don't know when they'll eat next, quickly, hungrily, without looking up. She said her name was Ashley Price, 17 years old, living on the streets, stealing. Not because she likes it, because she has nothing else. Ethan asked if she had a family. Ashley said no. Ethan asked if she had the gift. Ashley stopped chewing. She looked at him. Her face changed. The defiance was gone. For a second. For just a second, Ethan saw something else. Shame. Old. Familiar. Deeply ingrained. Ashley said no. She didn't have a gift. She never had. Nothing came at 7. Not at 8. Not at 9. Not later either. An empty space in her chest. Always empty. She said it quickly, like a memorized phrase, as if she'd said it so many times that the words had lost their meaning. Ethan nodded. He didn't say anything. Cyrus stirred inside him. Something strange came through the link. Not pity. Cyrus didn't know how to feel pity. Recognition. As if he'd seen something familiar. Emptiness. Only a different kind. Ashley finished eating, wiped her mouth on her sleeve, stood up, said thank you for the meal, and left. Quickly, without looking back. Ethan sat at the table. He watched her go. Cyrus said one word inside, through the connection, not with a voice, with an image. Train. Ethan looked at his chest. He thought of a question. Who? The answer came instantly. Her. Ethan and his group had settled in Ainsley. Ethan worked as a loader. Sora took on hunting contracts. Lina worked at a bakery. Ethan found a mention in a treatise that, over the course of 300 years, all 17 cases of independent gifts had ended in destruction. At the market, Ethan met a 17-year-old street thief named Ashley Price, who did not have, and had never had, a gift. Cyrus caught her stealing and fed her. Through their link, Cyrus told Ethan that he wanted to train Ashley. It took 2 days to find Ashley. She lived in the lower quarter, a neighborhood by the river, with narrow streets and dark courtyards, smelling of rot and wet stone. Ethan went there in the morning. He asked around. A skinny girl, reddish hair sticking up, quick hands. People in the lower quarter didn't like questions. But on the third try, an old woman by the well pointed to the roof. Ashley was sitting on the roof of a 3-story building. Her legs were dangling. She was biting into an apple. She saw Ethan. She wasn't surprised. She said she thought he'd come sooner. Ethan asked how she knew he was coming. Ashley said that the people who buy her food always come back. Either they want something, or they want to help. Both are a problem. Ethan said he wanted to offer her training. Ashley stopped chewing. She looked at him. She asked, "Training in what?" Ethan said, "Combat training, hand-to-hand combat. Without the gift, just the body, just skills." Ashley said that without the gift, no one would want her as a fighter. That in this world, a person without the gift is a cripple. That she wouldn't be accepted into the guild, the guard, or even the militia. Ethan said his coach wasn't from this world, and that it didn't matter to him whether she had the gift or not. Ashley looked at him for a long time. Then she jumped off the roof. She landed softly, like a cat. She said, "Fine." But if this was a trap, she'd rob him blind and run away. Ethan said that was fair. They walked into the courtyard of the bookstore. Cyrus stepped out. He stood in front of Ashley. He crossed his arms. He looked down at her. Ashley looked up at him. 2 stubborn gazes. 2 personalities unaccustomed to backing down. Cyrus said, "Start with the stance." Ashley said she knew the stance. She stood up. Wrong. Weight on her heels. Arms too high. Knees straight. Cyrus walked over silently. He adjusted her legs, adjusted her arms, shifted her weight. Ashley stood there. She was shaking after 3 minutes. After 5 minutes, her legs buckled. She fell. She got up. She got back into the stance. She fell after 4 minutes. She got up. Cyrus didn't say a word. He just stood nearby, waiting. Ashley got up, fell, got up. On the 6th try, she held the stance for 7 minutes. Cyrus nodded. Once, briefly. Ashley saw that nod. And something in her expression changed. Not defiance, not shame. Hunger. Not physical, something else. A hunger for someone to notice her, to nod, to say it was enough. Enough for today. She came every day. In the morning, Ethan trained with Cyrus. In the evening, Cyrus trained Ashley. In between, Ethan worked. Lina baked. Sora hunted. Ashley would arrive dirty and angry and leave dirty and exhausted. After a week, her stance was steady. After 2 weeks, she started striking. Cyrus taught her differently than he taught Ethan. Ethan was learning to be a fighter. Ashley was learning to survive. The difference was huge. A fighter stands and fights. A survivor strikes and runs, dodges, uses everything around her: chairs, walls, sand, darkness. Cyrus showed her dirty tricks: a knee strike, a jab to the throat, sand in the eyes, a hair pull. Ashley soaked it all in, quickly, eagerly. She was faster than Ethan. Her body was used to moving. Years on the streets had taught her to dodge, hide, and run. Now Cyrus was turning that into a weapon. One evening, Ashley asked Cyrus why he was doing this, why he was training her. She was nobody to him. She wasn't even a gift bearer. She was empty. Cyrus looked at her. Then he said she wasn't empty. That being empty meant having nothing inside. But inside her was anger, stubbornness, speed, willpower. He said he'd seen gifts weaker than what was inside her. Ashley stood there in silence. Her lips were trembling. She said it was the first time anyone had ever told her there was something inside her. Cyrus said he wasn't just someone. He was a gift. And he knew more about emptiness than she realized. Because gifts are born empty, and they fill themselves. Ashley didn't answer. She turned around. She left, quickly, without looking back. Just like the first time. Ethan stood in the yard. He watched her go. Cyrus stood beside him. He crossed his arms. He was silent. Ethan asked over the comm if everything was all right. Cyrus replied that he didn't know. That for the first time in his life, he'd told the truth, and he wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do. Ethan smirked. He said out loud that the truth is usually the right thing. Cyrus said Ethan was spouting cliches. Ethan said cliches are cliches precisely because they work. Cyrus said nothing, but the heat grew warmer. Meanwhile, Ethan would go to Corin's place. He read books. Every evening after practice, he'd sit on the bench. Corin didn't ask why. He'd just place a candle on the table and leave. Ethan read treatises on the gifts, church records, historical chronicles. He was looking for mentions of reborn gifts. A word he didn't know but sensed through the bond. Cyrus remembered another host. Ethan saw fragments in his dreams. A face, a golden clasp, a scream. So Cyrus had lived before, in another body, in another person's body, and somehow ended up in Ethan. On the 8th day of his reading, he found it. Not in a treatise, not in a church book, in a collection of urban legends on the bottom shelf. A small book, worn, anonymous. It contained a story. 100 years ago, a blacksmith lived in the town of Carmine. His gift perished in a fire. A year later, the blacksmith found a wandering monk who performed a ritual. And a new gift entered the blacksmith's chest. Not a newborn, an old one, a stranger's. A gift that remembered its former host. The book called it rebirth. The gift did not die. The gift passed on, from one body to another, with memories, with skills, with a personality. Ethan closed the book. He looked into the darkness of the shop. The heat in his chest pulsed quietly. Cyrus heard his thoughts. He knew what Ethan had found. Through the connection came neither confirmation nor denial. Silence. A long one. Heavy. Like the breath of a person deciding whether or not to speak. Ethan didn't press the issue. He put the book back, went upstairs, lay down, closed his eyes, and thought that his gift had a history that began long before him, and that this history had ended badly. Because stories with golden clasps and screams in the dark don't end well. Ethan found Ashley and offered to train her. Cyrus began teaching Ashley combat skills without the gift. Ashley turned out to be a quick learner. For the first time, Cyrus told her that she had power within her and that she wasn't empty. Ethan found a mention of rebirth in a book of urban legends, a gift that passes from one body to another, along with memory and personality. Cyrus neither confirmed nor denied this through their connection. During the 3rd week in Ainsley, Ethan found Maeve. Or rather, Maeve found him. He was sitting at Corin's shop, reading the 4th volume of the History of the Gifts. Thick, dusty, boring. Half the words were incomprehensible. Ethan was plowing through a page on the classification of passive gifts when the shop door opened. A girl walked in. Short, dark hair tied back in a bun, thin-framed glasses, pale, thin. She was wearing a gray dress with ink stains on the cuffs. She was carrying a stack of books, 5 of them, heavy ones. She set them on the counter. Cora nodded to her as if they were acquaintances. She nodded back. Then she turned and saw Ethan. She saw the book in his hands. She walked over, tilted her head, read the title. She asked why he needed the 4th volume of Hollis if he hadn't read the 2nd one, which contained the basic definitions. Ethan looked at her. He said he didn't know about the 2nd one. She walked over to the shelf. She returned a minute later. She placed 3 books in front of him. She said that if he was interested in the classification of the gifts, he needed to start with Velis, then the 2nd volume of Hollis, then Marrow, and only then the 4th volume of Hollis. Ethan asked who she was. She said her name was Maeve Ashton, a librarian at the Ainsley Academy, 21 years old. Ethan asked why a librarian was bringing books to the shop. Maeve said that Corin buys discarded copies from her. The Academy writes off books every season. Most are in good condition, just old. Corin resells them. Maeve gets a little pocket money for ink. Everyone's happy. Ethan looked at the 3 books in front of him, then at Maeve. He asked how much she knew about the gifts. Maeve adjusted her glasses. She said that was her job, that she cataloged all the treatises on the gifts in the Academy's library, that she had read more than 300 texts on the subject, including the banned ones. She spoke the last word more quietly. Ethan asked if she'd ever heard of the rebirth. Maeve froze. Her hand, which had been adjusting her glasses, stopped. She looked at Ethan, then at Corin behind the counter. Corin was busy. He wasn't listening. Maeve sat down across from Ethan, quietly. She leaned forward. She said that rebirth was a term on the banned list, that any mention of it in official documents had been struck out 200 years ago by order of the church, that she had found 3 references to it in footnotes that the censors had missed. 3 references. Over 300 years. Ethan asked what they said. Maeve said that rebirth is a process in which the gift passes from a dead host to a living one, not like the transplants the church performs. In a transplant, the gift loses its identity. In rebirth, the gift retains everything: memory, skills, personality, will. A reborn gift isn't a tool. It's a fully fledged soul in a new body. Maeve said that the church had banned the term itself because it implies that gifts are individuals. And if gifts are individuals, then they cannot be seized and destroyed. And if they cannot be seized and destroyed, the entire system of control collapses. Ethan listened. The heat in his chest pulsed rapidly. Cyrus heard it, every word. Ethan asked if Maeve knew of any specific cases of rebirth. Maeve said no, that all such cases had been erased from the records, that she'd found only references to references, shadows of shadows. But if someone were searching for information about rebirth, that someone would have a reason, and she'd like to know what it was. Ethan looked at her. Maeve looked at him. Behind her glasses, her eyes were intelligent, calm, patient. She didn't demand an answer. She waited. Ethan made up his mind. Not because he trusted her, because he needed help. He said that his gift remembered its former owner. Maeve didn't flinch. She didn't flinch. She wasn't afraid. She adjusted her glasses. She said that changed everything. Then she said she wanted to help. Ethan asked why. Maeve paused. Then she said she had a gift of her own, a passive one. Her gift remembers everything she's ever read, every page, every word, every footnote. In Halland's warrior culture, this is considered useless. Her gift doesn't shoot, it doesn't cut, it doesn't protect, it remembers. And all her life, people have pitied her for it. Teachers, classmates, family. Poor Maeve with her useless gift. She said that if gifts were personalities, then maybe one day someone would look at her gift and see not a tool that had been unlucky, but a person who had been unlucky with the world. Ethan was silent. Then he said he wanted to introduce her to Cyrus. Maeve asked who that was, and then said it was his gift. Maeve asked if his gift had a name. Ethan said yes. Maeve took off her glasses. She wiped them with the hem of her dress. She put them back on. She said that in 300 years of documented history, no gift had ever had a name. Ethan said that Cyrus hadn't read the documented history. Maeve smiled. A small smile, quiet, like a candle in a dark room. That evening, Ethan led Maeve into the courtyard of the bookstore. Cyrus came out. He stood up. He crossed his arms. He looked at Maeve. Maeve looked at him. She adjusted her glasses. Then she spoke. She asked if he remembered the former owner. Cyrus tensed. His face grew stiff. He said he remembered, not everything, just fragments. Maeve asked if he could describe what he remembered. Cyrus was silent for a long time. Then he spoke, quietly, without his usual contempt in his voice. He said he remembered a face, a young one, with dark hair. He remembered a gold clasp on the collar. He remembered a room, a large one, with high ceilings. He remembered a voice calling him by name, not Cyrus, another name. He remembered the fight, short, terrifying. He remembered how the master fell. He remembered the darkness. Then, nothing. Then the grove, the circle, the old man, Ethan. Maeve listened. She didn't interrupt. When Cyrus finished, she asked one thing. The gold clasp on the collar. What shape was it? Cyrus said it was shaped like a feather. Maeve turned pale. Not much, but Ethan noticed. She said that a feather-shaped clasp was the symbol of the Holland royal house. Only direct heirs wear a feather on their collar. Silence. Ethan looked at Cyrus. Cyrus stood motionless. His face betrayed nothing. But a storm was raging through the link. Maeve said that 5 years ago, Halland's Crown Prince Cassian had died. Officially, from a fever. He was 19. His gift vanished. The church announced that the gift had dissipated along with its bearer, as it should be. Maeve looked at Cyrus. Cyrus looked at her. Maeve said quietly that the gift hadn't dissipated. The gift was standing right in front of her. Cyrus didn't answer. It returned to Ethan's chest. A heat flared up, hot, angry, painful. Ethan clenched his teeth. He caught his breath. He looked at Maeve. Maeve was standing in the courtyard, pale, with shining eyes. She said that if this was true, they would come for them. Not a spy, not a merchant. The church would come for them. Ethan said he knew. Maeve said she would help. Ethan said it was dangerous. Maeve said that her whole life had been safe and pointless, and that she was tired of it. Ethan met Maeve Ashton, the librarian at the Ainsley Academy. Maeve knew about the rebirth from banned footnotes and confirmed that the church had destroyed all references to it. Cyrus shared fragments of memories about his former master. Maeve determined from a gold pen-shaped clasp that Cyrus's former master was Crown Prince Cassian, who had died 5 years ago. Maeve decided to help Ethan. It became clear that the church would come after them. 3 days after his conversation with Maeve, Ethan gathered everyone together. It was evening. In the courtyard of the bookstore. Candles burned on upside-down crates. Lina sat on a bench. Sora stood by the wall. Ashley sat on the roof of the annex with her legs dangling. Maeve stood with a notebook in her hands. Cyrus stepped out of Ethan's chest and stood beside him. Ethan looked at them. 5 faces. 6, if you count Cyrus. 2 months ago, he'd woken up alone in a scorched circle. Now he had people. He told them everything, from the beginning, about the ritual, about the old man, about Cyrus, about the rebirth, about Prince Cassian, about the Inquisition, about how the spy had most likely already sent a report, about how they would come for them. Lina listened in silence. Her hands rested on her knees, calmly. Sora listened with the expression of someone hearing confirmation of what she'd already suspected. Ashley listened with her mouth agape. Maeve listened and took notes in her notebook. When Ethan finished, there was silence. Then Ashley said it was the craziest thing she'd ever heard, and that she was in. Ethan looked at her. He asked what she was in for. Ashley said she was in for anything, that she'd been living on a rooftop and stealing apples, that she had no gift, no family, no home, that for the first time in her life, someone was feeding her and teaching her without asking for anything in return, and that if she had to fight for these people, she would fight. Cyrus looked at her. He didn't say anything, but Ethan felt a wave of warmth through their bond. Quiet. Deep. Sora said they needed a plan. Not a general one, a specific one. Where to run if they came, where to hide, who would fight, who would lead the others to safety. Maeve said that running was a tactic. She needed a strategy. We need to figure out who killed Prince Cassian and why. Because if the killer is on the Archon Council, he's not just looking for Cyrus, he's covering his tracks. Ethan asked how we could find that out. Maeve said she had access to the Academy's archives, not all of them, but many, that she could look for records of the prince's death. Who was there? Who signed the death certificate? Who stood to gain? It'll take time, but she'll find it. Ethan nodded. Then he looked at Lina. He asked if she was all right. Lina was silent for a moment. Then she said that when she left Willowbrook, she thought it would be an adventure. Markets, the city, new places. She didn't think there would be a mystery involving a dead prince and the Inquisition. Then she said that it didn't change anything. She'd made her decision. She was here. Ethan said, "All right." Cyrus looked at Lina, and for the first time he spoke to her directly, not through Ethan. He told her that her bread was better than anything he'd ever tasted in both his lifetimes. Lina looked at him. She smiled, quietly, warmly, as if someone had lit a candle in a dark room. The next few days were busy. Everyone went about their business. Ethan trained and worked. His body continued to change. His morning runs grew longer. His punches got faster. His stance became as natural as breathing. Cyrus no longer said that Ethan was worse than a sack of potatoes. Now he said that Ethan was at the level of an average beginner at the academy. For a 22-year-old guy who had started from scratch 2 months ago, that wasn't bad. For Cyrus, it was pathetic, but tolerable. Sora took charge of security. She patrolled the area around the shop. She knew all the entrances and exits. She knew who lived in the neighboring houses, who walked down the street every day, who was new. She mapped out escape routes. 3 options: across the rooftops, through the canal, through the shop's basement, where Corin stored old books and which had an exit onto the alley. Ashley trained every evening. Her progress was frightening. In 3 weeks, she'd be faster than Ethan. Not stronger, faster. Her body was lighter. Years on the streets had taught her how to move. Cyrus said she wouldn't become a fighter, but a shadow. Someone you couldn't see until it was too late. Ashley would smirk when he said that, but her eyes would gleam. Maeve was digging. Every day after work at the library, she'd take notes home with her. She'd copy by hand whatever she couldn't take out. She memorized the rest. Her gift remembered everything. Every line, every name, every date. She was piecing together the picture, slowly, bit by bit. The death of Prince Cassian. Who was there? A week later, she brought her first discovery. Prince Cassian died in his chambers. The official cause of death was fever. The death certificate death was signed by 3 people: the prince's personal physician, the abbot of the palace chapel, and Archon Aerin, 3rd in seniority on the Council of Archons. Maeve said that Aerin had been 5th at the time. After the prince's death and the reshuffling of the council, he became 3rd. Coincidence, or not? 10 days later, she brought a second discovery. The prince's personal physician died 2 months after Cassian. Officially, he drowned in the river. The head of the palace chapel transferred to a remote monastery on the northern border. He vanished from all records. 2 of the 3 witnesses had been eliminated. The 3rd became an Archon. Maeve said it wasn't a fever, it was murder. Ethan sat and listened. A heat pulsed heavily in his chest. Cyrus was silent, but images flowed through the link. The same face, dark hair, a golden clasp, a smile. And then a new image, one that hadn't been there before. A man in a black robe, his face in shadow, gloved hands, a voice speaking softly, calmly, and a knife plunging into the back. Not Cassian, Cyrus. The knife pierced Dar, not the master. They killed Dar first, because the prince's gift was too powerful, and because Dar could have spoken, could have named a name, could have testified. But Dar didn't die. Dar was reborn. And now he remembers. Ethan opened his eyes, looked at Maeve, said that Cyrus had remembered something, that the assassin had struck Dar first, that the assassin was wearing a black cloak and gloves. Maeve took notes. Then she looked up. She said that a black robe and gloves were the uniform of the Inquisitors, the highest rank in the Inquisition. Silence. Ethan looked at Sora. Sora looked at Ethan. A mutual understanding passed between them. The Inquisition had killed the prince, on the orders of Archon Varan, or with his involvement. And now the Inquisition is searching for the gift, who isn't dead, and who could expose them. Ethan asked Maeve how much time they had. Maeve said she didn't know, that the spy's report had likely reached the capital 3 weeks ago, that the Inquisition usually dispatches an Inquisitor within a month, which meant the Inquisitor might already be on the way, or already here. Ethan stood up. He went out into the courtyard. He looked up at the sky. 2 moons, one white, the other was blue. The heat in his chest pulsed steadily, quietly, like a heartbeat before a fight. Cyrus didn't say anything, but a single feeling came through the link. Sharp, clear, like the toll of a bell. Readiness. Ethan gathered the whole group and told them the truth about Cyrus and Prince Cassian. Everyone decided to stay. Each took on a role. Sora, security. Maeve, reconnaissance. Ashley, training. Lina, support. Maeve discovered that the prince's death certificate had been signed by Archon Varan, who had subsequently risen in the council. The other 2 witnesses had been eliminated. Through the link, Cyrus recalled that the assassin had been wearing the uniform of an Inquisition interrogator. It became clear that the Inquisition had killed the prince, and that the interrogator might already be in Ainsley. The interrogator arrived on the 4th day after the meeting. Ethan didn't see her enter the city. No one saw her. She simply appeared, like a knife that had been in its sheath and suddenly found itself at someone's throat. Corin was the first to notice her. He came to the shop in the morning and said that a woman had stopped by his place the previous evening. She'd asked about the guests. Tall, shoulder-length light hair, a black traveling cloak, a quiet voice, polite, cold. Corin said that he hadn't given anything away. He told her that his niece lived upstairs with her friends. The woman nodded. She thanked him. She left. Corin said that as she was leaving, he noticed her gloves. Black, thin. She didn't even take them off indoors. Ethan looked at Sora. Sora said one word. Interrogator. They didn't run. Sora said that running now would only confirm it. The interrogator is searching. She hasn't found them yet. If they made a sudden move, she'd realize she was on the right track. Better to stay put. Act normal. Let her search and not find anything. Ethan agreed. Inside, Cyrus disagreed. Pressure was building through the connection. The urge to go out, to confront her, to figure things out. Ethan suppressed it. He thought to himself. He asked Cyrus if he trusted him. A long pause. Then warmth. Reluctant. Heavy. Yes, Ethan told him then to stay quiet. The next 2 days were the hardest. Ethan went to the pier, hauled boxes, came back, worked out in the yard, ate, slept. Everything as usual. Only inside, every nerve was on edge. Cyrus sat quietly. He curled up, shrunk. The heat in his chest became almost imperceptible, like embers under ashes. Lina worked at the bakery. She baked bread. She smiled at the customers. Her hands didn't tremble. Ethan admired her for that. She was scared. He could tell. But she didn't show it. A 20-year-old girl from a village who had never seen danger now lived right next to it and kept on baking bread. Ashley disappeared from the streets. Sora told her not to show up in the lower quarter. Ashley argued. Sora said that if the Inquisitor saw a street urchin near the shop, she'd start watching her. Ashley fell silent. She went up to the roof. She sat there, angry, quiet. But she obeyed. Maeve continued to work at the library. Every evening she brought new records. On the third day she brought a name. The Inquisitor who had arrived in Ainsley was named Remy Well, 26 years old, top rank, specializing in identifying anomalous gifts. In 3 years of service, she had extracted 14 gifts. All 14 were destroyed. All 14 hosts survived, technically. Maeve said that a survivor after a gift extraction is a person who breathes and eats but feels nothing else. An empty shell, a living corpse. Ethan listened. A heat in his chest stirred. Not fear, anger. Cyrus's anger. Bitter. Old. Ethan thought to himself. He said quietly, "I won't let that happen." Warmth in response. On the 5th day, Remy Well came to the bakery. Lina told him that evening, her voice trembling but her words steady. The investigator walked in. She bought some bread. She stood at the counter. She talked to Doris. She asked about the neighborhood residents, about new faces, about oddities. Then she turned to Lina. She asked if she'd been in town long. Lina said 2 months. Remy asked where she was from. Lina said Willowbrook. Remy smiled. She said she knew Willowbrook, a small village, quiet. She asked why a girl from a quiet village had moved to the city. Lina said for work. Remy nodded. She bought another roll. Then she left. Lina said that Remy's gloved hands had been calm, that her voice had been soft, that her eyes had been empty, like someone looking right through you. Ethan listened. Then he hugged Lina, for the first time. He simply put his hands on her shoulders and held her. Lina stood there. Then she pressed her forehead against his chest, right where Cyrus used to live. The heat beneath her forehead grew warmer, softer, as if the gift were warming her through Ethan's skin. They stood like that for a minute. Then Lina pulled away. She wiped her eyes. She said she'd bake a berry pie tomorrow, because if the world is falling apart, at least there's a pie. On the 6th day, Remy found Ethan. He was walking from the pier. It was evening. The streets were emptying. She stood on the bridge over the canal, alone. No weapons in sight. A black cloak, black gloves, blonde hair, a beautiful face. Cold, like a marble statue that someone had forgotten to warm. She said she was looking for him, that she knew who he was, that she knew what was inside him. Ethan stopped. He looked at her. A heat flared in his chest. Cyrus was struggling to break free. Ethan held back, with difficulty, like holding a door shut when a hurricane rages behind it. Remy said she didn't want to fight, that she wanted to talk, that if Ethan handed Dar over voluntarily, the procedure would be quick, painless, for the host. Ethan asked, "And for Dar?" Remy paused. Then she said that Dar was a tool. Tools don't feel pain. Ethan said that her Dar didn't feel it either. Remy flinched. A small movement, almost imperceptible. But Ethan saw it. He didn't know where those words had come from. Maybe Cyrus had prompted him through the link. Maybe he'd figured it out on his own. But he'd hit the mark. Remy said she didn't have time for small talk, that she was giving him 3 days. Hand over the gift, or she'd extract it by force. Then she left. Ethan stood on the bridge, trembling, not from fear, from the effort. Keeping Cyrus inside took all his strength. The heat pulsed furiously. The gift wanted to break free. It wanted to fight. It wanted to show the interrogator who it was. Ethan breathed, slowly, deeply. He focused on a single thought. Not now. 3 days. We'll get ready. The heat subsided, slowly, reluctantly, like a beast that lay back down but didn't close its eyes. Ethan went home. 3 days. Interrogator Remy. Well arrived in Ainsley and began her search. She questioned Corin and Lina. Maeve learned that Remy had extracted and destroyed 14 gifts over the course of 3 years. Remy found Ethan at the fuck and gave him 3 days to voluntarily surrender the gift. Ethan stopped Cyrus from confronting her. They have 3 days to prepare. The first of the 3 days was spent on the plan. Sora said they couldn't fight the Inquisitor in town. The guards, witnesses. If Remy called for reinforcements from the capital, Ethan and everyone around him would be declared criminals. They needed a place, outside the city, where no one would see them, where they could talk and fight if they had to. Maeve said there's an abandoned church 2 hours' walk north of Ainsley. An old one. Stone. Roofless. The church abandoned it 40 years ago when they built a new one in town. It's in the middle of nowhere. There's only one road. You can see anyone coming from a kilometer away. Ethan asked why they needed a place to fight if the plan wasn't to fight. Sora looked at him. She said the plan always includes a fight, even if the goal is something else. Ethan asked what the goal was. Maeve answered. She said that Remy isn't a villain, that she believes in what she's doing. She believes that free gifts are a threat to the world. She believes that extraction is protection. Maeve said that people like that can't be defeated in battle. They can only be defeated by the truth. Ethan asked what truth. Maeve said that Remy has a gift, trained into silence, suppressed to the point of being a mere tool. If Remy sees that a gift can be a person and the world doesn't fall apart, she might begin to doubt. And doubt is the beginning. Ethan looked at Cyrus. Cyrus was standing against the wall, arms crossed, silent. Doubt was flowing through the connection, not about the plan, but within himself. Cyrus wasn't sure he could talk to a stranger's gift. He'd never done it before. He didn't know if it was possible to reach a gift that had been silent for years. Ethan said aloud that they would try. Cyrus looked at him. His eyes were serious, without his usual contempt, without sarcasm. He said that if it didn't work, they'd have to fight. Ethan said it would work. Cyrus asked where that confidence came from. Ethan said nowhere. He just believed. Cyrus looked at him for a long time. Then he said Ethan was an idiot. Then he added quietly that maybe that was his only redeeming quality. The second day was spent preparing. Ethan trained, not on technique, on coordination. He and Cyrus learned to work together, not separately, together. Ethan stood in his stance. Cyrus stepped out of his body and moved in sync. Ethan stepped to the left. Cyrus stepped to the right. Ethan threw a straight punch. Cyrus threw a side punch. 2 bodies, 1 intention. It was hard. Cyrus was faster, stronger, more experienced. Ethan slowed him down, threw him off his rhythm, got in his way. But by the evening of the second day, something clicked. 1 moment, 1 second. Ethan stepped, and Cyrus stepped, and they found themselves exactly where they needed to be, back to back. As if they'd danced this dance 100 times. A warmth flared in his chest. Not hot, warm, like a handshake. Cyrus didn't say anything through the link, but Ethan sensed that Dar was surprised, pleasantly surprised, for the first time. Sora was planning their escape route, just in case things went wrong. Ashley was studying the terrain around the temple. She'd left in the morning and returned in the evening. She knew every stone, every bush, every path. Lina was baking. A lot. As if the outcome depended on the amount of bread. Maybe it did. Maeve was working on something else. She was searching for the name of Dar Remy. The Academy's archives contained records of all the inquirers. Their gifts were registered upon entering service. Names weren't assigned because the gifts didn't have names. But in the old records, from before the church tightened the rules, they sometimes noted a description of the gift. A nickname. A description. On the morning of the third day, Maeve came in with a piece of paper. There was one word on it. Nell. Maeve said she'd found it in the record of Remy's enlistment. a field that was later removed from the forms. The gift's initial designation before training. Nell. Not a name, more like a call sign. But it was the first and last word by which Remy's gift was ever called. Before, he was taught to be silent. Ethan took the slip of paper. He looked at the word. Then he looked at Cyrus. Cyrus was standing nearby. His face was impassive. But through the bond, something was being transmitted that Ethan felt for the first time. Compassion. A gift who remembered a name. A gift who had been stripped of a name. Cyrus understood the difference better than anyone else. On the evening of the third day, Ethan left the shop. Alone. He walked toward the bridge. Remy was waiting, standing in the same spot, as if she hadn't left for 3 days. Ethan said he wouldn't give up the gift. Remy said she'd expected as much. Ethan said he wanted to show her something. Outside the city, in the old temple to the north. Tomorrow morning. No backup, no traps, 1-on-1. Remy looked at him. Her eyes were cold, calm. She asked why she should agree. Ethan said it was because she'd extracted the Dara 14 times and never once asked if it hurt them, and that maybe it was time to ask. Remy was silent. For a long time. The wind ruffled her light hair. The gloves on her hands clenched into fists. Then they relaxed. She said, "Tomorrow, at dawn." Ethan nodded. He turned around. He walked home. The heat in his chest hummed quietly, steadily, like a prayer. The group devised a plan. They decided to meet Remy at an abandoned temple outside the city and try to reach her through the truth rather than through battle. Ethan and Cyrus trained to work in sync and for the first time moved as one. Maeve found the original designation for Remy's gift in the old records. Nell. Ethan met with Remy and suggested they meet at the temple. Remy agreed. The rain began at dawn. Light. Cold. The sky was overcast with gray. The 2 moons were hidden behind the clouds. They left the city before dawn. Ethan. Sora. Cyrus was inside. Lina stayed at the shop. Ashley had left before everyone else. She was already at the temple, keeping watch. Maeve stayed with Lina, just in case they had to run. The temple stood on a hill. Stone walls twice a person's height. No roof. Inside, grass had pushed through the floor slabs. The altar was lopsided. The columns were cracked. Beautiful ruins. Sad ones. Ethan went inside. He stood in the center. Sora stayed outside. By the entrance. She was out of sight but nearby. The rain had intensified. Drops pounded against the stones, against the grass, against Ethan's shoulders. He waited. The heat in his chest pulsed steadily. Cyrus was calm. Calmer than Ethan. A sense of readiness came through the connection. Not for battle. For a conversation. Remy arrived 20 minutes later, alone, without reinforcements. Ethan appreciated that. She could have brought soldiers. She could have set up an ambush. But she came alone, because she was confident, or because she wanted to see. She entered the temple. Her cloak was wet. Her hair was plastered to her face. She wore gloves. She stopped 5 steps away from Ethan. She looked at him. She said he had come. Ethan said he had come. Remy said she was ready to see what he wanted to show her. Ethan closed his eyes. He opened the connection, completely, without holding back. Cyrus emerged, not in a rush, not in a flash, slowly, like a person getting out of bed in the morning. He appeared next to Ethan, semi-transparent in the rain. His ash-colored hair was wet. His gray eyes were open. He stood there, looking at Remy. Remy looked at him. Her expression didn't change. She'd seen unbound gifts before, 14 times. She knew what this was. She knew how to handle it. Cyrus spoke. He didn't cross his arms. He didn't look down on her. For the first time, he stood before someone openly, without a guard up, without putting on a front. He said he knew who she was, that he knew what she was doing, that he knew she believed it was right. He said he wasn't angry with her. Remy's chin twitched slightly. She hadn't expected that. Cyrus said he was angry at the world that had taught her that gifts were things, that they could be extracted like splinters, that they don't feel, don't remember, don't suffer. He said he remembers. He remembers his former master, remembers his face, his voice, his laughter. He remembers how that man called him by name, a different name. He remembers how the knife entered his back. He remembers the pain. He remembers the darkness. He remembers how he died, slowly, over 3 days, in the darkness, alone. Remy listened. Her face was impassive, but her gloved hands were trembling. Cyrus said he wasn't a thing, that no gift was a thing, that the 14 she had extracted were screaming, maybe not with their voices, maybe inside, but they screamed, and she knew it, because her own gift had screamed once too, before she taught it to be silent. Remy turned pale. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She said that Cyrus didn't know what he was talking about, that her gift was silent because that was the right thing to do. Because gifts that speak become dangerous. They lose control. They threaten the world. Cyrus asked who they threaten, the world? Or those who built the world on their silence? Remy didn't answer. Cyrus took a step toward her, just one. Remy stepped back, instinctively. Then she stopped. She was angry at herself for backing away. Cyrus said he wanted to talk to her gift. Remy said no, sharply, quickly, like a blow. Cyrus said he wasn't asking for permission. He was asking her not to interfere, because the gift wasn't her property. The gift was a living being she was keeping in a cage, and he wanted to open the door to that cage. Not to let it out, just to open it, so the gift could decide for itself. Remy stood there. The rain was pouring down. Drops ran down her face. She was silent. Ethan looked at her. He saw something breaking behind her eyes, slowly, painfully, like ice on a river in spring. Remy asked why. Why did he need this? Ethan spoke up. For the first time during the entire conversation. He said he didn't want a war. He didn't want a revolution. He didn't want to overthrow the council. He wanted Cyrus to be able to eat bread, to argue with him, to sleep on his shoulder after a fight. He wanted Dar to be able to be human, without fear, without a knife in his back. He said that was all, nothing more. Remy looked at him, then at Cyrus, then back at Ethan. Then she closed her eyes. Her gloves clenched into fists. Then she unclenched them. She said one word, quietly, like an exhalation. All right. Cyrus stepped toward her, close, within arm's reach. He raised his palm, not toward Remy, toward her chest, where Dar lived, where Dar was silent. Cyrus spoke the name, quietly, as if afraid it would shatter from a loud voice. Nell. Silence. Rain, wind, rocks, and then movement. Something stirred inside Remy, small, faint, like a sprout pushing through a rock, light, dim, under the skin on Remy's chest, trembling, hesitant. Remy's eyes flew open. Her mouth fell open. She clutched her chest, not from pain, but from a sensation she hadn't felt in years. Her gift stirred. It responded to a name, to the voice of another gift. The light grew brighter just a little. It flickered like a candle in the wind. Cyrus said it again. Nell. The light flared, and a creature emerged from Remy's chest, small, pale, resembling a 5-year-old child, with huge eyes, with slender arms. It stood next to Remy and trembled. It looked at Cyrus. It opened its mouth and made a sound. Not a word, a sound, like a breath after a long dive underwater. Remy looked at her gift, at the creature she saw every day but had never seen like this before, alive, trembling, looking at her with eyes that held not fear, but a question. One question. Why? Remy let her hands fall. Something was streaming down her face, not rain. She sank to her knees, on the wet stones, and for the first time in her life, she looked at her gift not as an interrogator looking at a tool, but as one human being to another. Ethan stood beside her, Cyrus stood beside her. Nell stood beside Remy. The four of them. 2 bearers, 2 gifts, in the rain, in the ruined temple. Ethan said quietly, his voice hoarse from the cold and from everything he was feeling through the bond. He said, "You see, it's not the end of the world. Everyone's just tired of keeping quiet." Cyrus leaned against his shoulder, wet, heavy, tired, and said that Ethan had said something good today. Ethan said, "Thank you." Cyrus said it louder. Ethan looked at him, at his wet, ash-colored hair, at his gray eyes that held no contempt. For the first time ever, there was no contempt. He said, "Screw you, Cyrus." Remy, kneeling in the rain, laughed for the first time in her life. Ethan and Cyrus met Remy in an abandoned temple. Cyrus spoke to her openly. He told her that he remembered the death of his former master. Ethan said he didn't want a revolution, but rather the right for the gifts to be human. Cyrus called Remy's gift by the name Nell. For the first time in years, Remy's gift responded and emerged. Remy broke down. For the first time, she saw her gift as a living being. The four of them stood in the rain inside the temple. The first conversation in history among the four of them took place. Remy did not return to the capital. Not right away. She stayed in Ainsley for 4 days. She lived in a room above a tavern on the other side of town. She visited Corin's shop every evening. She sat in the courtyard. She said nothing. She watched Cyrus train Ethan. She watched Ashley punch the sandbag. She watched Lina bring bread and set a plate in front of Dar. She watched Dar take the bread and eat. She watched and said nothing. On the second day, Nell came out again, alone, without Remy's command. Little, pale. She stood next to her mistress and watched everything with wide-open eyes. Lina crouched down in front of her. She held out a piece of pie. Nell looked at Remy. Remy turned away. She didn't forbid it. She didn't allow it. She just didn't look. Because if she looked, she'd have to decide something. And she wasn't ready yet. Nell took the pie, took a bite. Her eyes grew huge. Remy heard a sound, quiet, like a sigh. She turned around. Nell stood there with a piece of pie in her mouth, and something was running down her cheeks. Not tears. The gifts don't cry. Light. Thin streaks of light trickled down her face like warm streams. Remy watched. Her jaw trembled. She raised her hand. She took off her glove, the right one. For the first time in front of others. The hand beneath the glove was covered in scars. Fine, white, parallel. Traces of a ritual of suppression. Each scar represented a single time she had forced the gift to be silent. Remy held out her bare hand. She touched Nell's head. With her fingers. Gently. As if she were afraid Dar would crumble at her touch. Nell pressed herself against her palm, like a kitten. Remy closed her eyes. On the third day, she spoke. She was sitting in the courtyard. Everyone was nearby. She said she couldn't return to the Inquisition as before, that she couldn't continue extracting the Dars after she'd seen. But she couldn't just disappear either. They would come looking for her. If an Inquisitor doesn't return, it means she's either dead or a traitor. In either case, they'll send someone else, someone stronger, with a squad. Maeve said there was a third option. Remy returns. She writes a report stating that no anomalies were detected in Ainsley. A false trail, a red herring. That would buy time, months, maybe a year. Remy fell silent. Then she said that meant lying, to the order, to the church, to everything she believed in. Maeve said she wasn't lying. She was choosing what to believe in. Remy looked at Nell. Little Dar was sitting at her feet. For the first time, not inside her. Next to her. Like a child next to her mother. Remy said, "All right." On the fourth day, Remy left. In the morning. Quietly. Without goodbyes. She left a note on the table in the shop. 3 words. "I'll give you time." Ethan read the note, folded it, put it away. He looked at his people. Sora was standing by the wall. Ashley was sitting on the windowsill. Maeve was adjusting her glasses. Lina was kneading dough in the kitchen. Cyrus was standing next to Ethan. For the first time, his arms weren't crossed. For the first time, he wasn't looking down on him. Beside him. Just beside him. Ethan said they had time. He asked what they wanted to do with him. Sora said train, get stronger. If they came again, she wanted to be ready. Ashley said learn, fight, run, climb, to become the shadow Cyrus had promised to make her into. Maeve said to dig, to seek the truth, to gather evidence about Cassian's murder, about Varan's role, about the system built on the silence of living beings. Lina came out of the kitchen, with flour on her cheek. She said she wanted to open her own bakery. Everyone looked at her. Lina said that people need a home, a place they can come to eat, to talk, to rest. If they want to change the world, she said, they need a base, not a fortress, not a barracks, a home. Ethan looked at her, then at the others. Then he said it was the best idea he'd heard in 2 months. Cyrus said it was the only decent idea in 2 months. Ethan said, thanks for the clarification. Cyrus said, you're always welcome. They found a place a week later, a corner house by the canal. 2 stories. The first floor was a large hall with a stone floor and a fireplace. The second floor had 5 rooms. The basement was dry and spacious, a former workshop. The owner had moved to another city. The rent was 30 copper coins a month, expensive. But Sora earned money by hunting. Ethan worked. Lina baked. Maeve earned a salary at the library. It was enough. Just barely, but it was enough. Lina turned the first floor into a bakery and a dining hall. Tables, benches, an oven that Garrett helped build. He'd come from Willowbrook for 3 days when he heard the news. Ethan hadn't expected that. Garrett came. He built the oven. He shook Ethan's hand, said the hayloft missed him, and left. Ashley took a room in the attic, a small one, with a window facing the roof. She hung a sign on the door, "Do not enter." Then she wiped it off, wrote it again. Knock. It was the first home of her life, the first door behind which someone was waiting for her. Maeve moved the books. 3 trunks. Corin helped carry them. He grumbled that books were heavier than stones. Maeve said that stones don't hold knowledge. Corin said that stones don't need shelves. Sora didn't take a room. She slept in the living room by the fireplace, on the floor. She said she was used to it. Ethan didn't insist. A week later, she moved into a room. She didn't say why. Ethan didn't ask. They opened a month later. Lina was baking. Ethan was serving. Ashley ran back and forth between the tables. Maeve sat in the corner reading. Sora stood by the door, watching everyone who came in. Cyrus didn't come out when there were guests, but in the evenings, when the doors were closed, he would sit down at the table. He ate bread. He drank water. He watched the fire in the fireplace. One evening after closing, everyone was sitting at the table. Lina set out a pie, hot with berries. Cyrus took a slice. He chewed. He was silent. Then he said one word. Ethan. Not the owner. Ethan. Everyone froze. Cyrus kept chewing, as if nothing had happened. But Ethan sensed, through their connection, a wave that was greater than a single word. It was an admission, quiet, simple, without speeches or grandstanding. Just a name. For the first time, without sarcasm. Remy stayed for 4 days. Her gift, Nell, began to emerge on its own. Remy decided to return to the capital and write a false report to buy the group some time. Ethan and his people found a space and opened a bakery home. Everyone took on their role. For the first time, Cyrus called Ethan by his name without sarcasm. A year passed, then another. The bakery by the canal became a place. Not famous, not flashy, but known to those who needed to know. People came for bread. They stayed for the warmth. Ethan didn't notice the moment it began. It was just that one evening people were sitting at the tables. Ordinary people, Artisans, merchants, soldiers off duty. They ate and talked and laughed and left feeling a little lighter than when they'd arrived. Lina ran the bakery, confidently, calmly. She was no longer just a girl from the village. She was the mistress of a home people wanted to return to. She made the decisions, every day, big and small. What kind of bread to bake, who to let in, who to keep out. And every time she made a decision, Ethan saw a quiet satisfaction in her eyes. The satisfaction of someone who was finally living her own life, not someone else's. Sora had changed. Not all at once, not noticeably, but she had changed. She still went out hunting. She still came back with game and money, but now she was coming home. Not just for the night. Home. She would sit by the fireplace. She would clean her blades. And sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, she would talk to Cyrus. Quietly, like with a colleague, like with an equal. Cyrus would answer. And in those moments, the emptiness inside Sora grew a little smaller. It didn't fill up. It just grew quieter. Ashley won her first street fight 6 months later, without the gift, with her fists, her knees, her elbows, just as Cyrus had taught her. She came home with a split lip and sparkling eyes. She found Ethan and Cyrus in the yard. Cyrus stood with his arms crossed. He looked at her and smiled. Ethan saw that smile. Small, fleeting, genuine. He said quietly, "He rarely does that. Remember this moment." Ashley remembered. She remembered it a year later too, when she passed the city guard exam. Without the gift. The first in Ainsley's history. The examiner didn't want to let her take the test. Sora came. She stood behind Ashley. She crossed her arms. She didn't say a word. The examiner looked at Sora, at the Hunters Guild insignia, at her eyes. He let her take the exam. Ashley passed. Maeve gathered the evidence. 2 years of painstaking work. Every document, every date, every name. She built a case. Not an accusation, the truth. A timeline. Prince Cassian, his gift. A stab in the back. Fake fever. Witnesses eliminated. Varen's rise to power. She recorded everything in 3 notebooks. Thick, detailed, irrefutable. Ethan trained for 2 years, every day, without fail. His body became something else. Not just lean, strong, muscular, enduring. He didn't catch up to Cyrus in the power of his gift. That was impossible. But he caught up to him physically. His endurance allowed Cyrus to fight longer. His stance allowed him to withstand the recoil from his gift techniques. They moved together, as one. Ethan stepped. Cyrus stepped. 2 bodies, 1 breath. A year later, a second one appeared. A guy from the town of Carmine, 20 years old. His gift began to speak. It had been silent for 15 years, and suddenly it spoke. The guy got scared. He ran away. He heard about the bakery by the canal. He came. He sat down at the table. He was trembling. Ethan set bread and water before him. Cyrus came out. He stood nearby. The young man watched the gift, which stood apart from its owner, and ate the bread. And he stopped trembling, because he saw that it was possible, that the world wasn't falling apart, that the bread wasn't turning into poison, that Dar could speak and nothing terrible would happen. Then a third person came, and a fourth, and a fifth, people whose gifts were beginning to awaken, beginning to stir, beginning to feel. They came to the bakery, sat down at the table, ate bread, saw Cyrus. They saw Nell, who came with Remy once every 2 months. They saw that it was possible to live, without hiding, without fear. Kaide's song arrived in the middle of the 2nd year, the former fiancé of the house's heir, a runaway from her engagement, haughty, aristocratic, perfect posture, perfect speech, perfect self-control. Her gift was suffocating inside her. Kaede knew it. She felt it, every day. The pressure, the weight, as if someone were knocking on a door you'd nailed shut from the inside. She came because she'd heard rumors about the bakery, about the gift that eats bread, about the guy from another world. She sat down at the table. She looked at Ethan. She said she wanted her gift to fall silent forever, that she couldn't stand the knocking anymore. Ethan looked at her, then at Cyrus. Cyrus came out. He walked over to Kaede, sat down across from her, and spoke to her gift. Not to her, through her. Quietly, calmly, like a person talking to someone behind a closed door. Kaede sat there. Her back was straight. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. Her lips were pressed together. And then she heard it. A voice, quiet, feminine, gentle, coming from her own chest. Her gift was speaking. The first word, her name, Kaede. Kaede's song, with perfect posture and perfect self-control, covered her face with her hands, and she cried for a long time, quietly, like someone who had finally stopped holding back. Remy would come, every 2 months, with reports for the Inquisition. False ones, precise, flawless. She became their eyes within the system. She warned them when someone from the Inquisition was heading toward Ainsley. She steered them in the other direction. She bought them time. Nell was growing up. She no longer looked like a child, now a teenager, with eyes that had seen it all. Remy no longer wore gloves. The scars on her hands were visible to everyone. She didn't hide them. They were a reminder. By the end of the second year, Maeve had finished the case. 3 notebooks, the whole truth. Everything needed to ensure the Council of Archons couldn't ignore it. The prince's murder, Varan's role, the systematic extermination of the gifts who were awakening. Maeve said the evidence could be handed over to the remaining Archons, those who weren't involved, those who might listen. Ethan asked what they hoped to achieve. Maeve said a trial, against Varan, against the extraction system, not a revolution, a precedent. The first case in Halland's history where a gift acts as a witness, as a person, as a living being with a right to speak. Ethan looked at Cyrus. Cyrus was standing against the wall, his arms crossed, out of habit, but without tension. He was looking at Ethan, and Ethan saw in his gray eyes something that hadn't been there 2 years ago. Trust. Ethan asked through the link if he was ready. Cyrus answered, not with an image, not with a feeling, with a word. Out loud. He said, yes. They drove to the capital. Everyone. Ethan, Cyrus, Sora, Lina, Ashley, Maeve, Kaede. Remy was waiting for them there, with Nell. The Council of Archons was in session in the High Tower, a stone building in the center of Halland City. Ethan stood before the doors, looking up. The tower soared into the sky, between the 2 moons. The heat in his chest pulsed steadily, calmly, like a heartbeat. A second heartbeat. They entered. The hall was enormous, round, with a high ceiling. 7 chairs arranged in a circle, 7 Archons, old men, military men, clergymen. Varan sat in the 3rd chair. Ethan recognized him, not by his face, by his hands. Hands in gloves, black, slender. Maeve presented the case, calmly, accurately. Every fact, every date, every name. The Archons listened. Varan listened. His expression didn't change. Then Ethan stood up. He said he wasn't asking for justice for himself. He was asking for Cyrus's rights, the right to testify, to speak, to be heard, not as a tool, as a person. The Archons exchanged glances. Varan said that the gifts had no right to speak, that it was the law, that the law had existed for 1,000 years. Ethan said that the law had been written by people who had never heard a gift speak, because they had never given him that opportunity. Silence. Ethan looked at Cyrus. Cyrus stepped out of his chest. He stood before the council, 7 pairs of eyes on him. 7 Archons looked at the gift, who stood apart from his master and gazed back at them. Cyrus began to speak. He told his story. About Cassian, about the knife in his back, about the darkness, about 3 days of dying, about rebirth, about Ethan, about bread, about how he fell asleep for the first time, about how he tasted something for the first time, about how he heard his name for the first time from the lips of a person who didn't treat him like an object. He spoke quietly, calmly, without anger, without accusations. He simply told his story, like a living person explaining what it means to be alive. The Archons listened. Some looked away. One took off his glasses and wiped them for far too long. Varen sat motionless. His face was pale. When Cyrus finished, silence hung in the air for a long time. Then one of the Archons, the eldest, with a white beard and weary eyes, asked Varen if it were true. Varen remained silent. Then he stood up. Then he said it was a lie, that the gift could not testify, that the gift was a thing, that the law was on his side. Remy stood up. She took off her gloves. She showed her scars. She said that was the price of silence. Nell emerged from her chest. She stood beside her, small, pale, but with eyes that burned. Kaede stood up. Her gift emerged, quiet, gentle. In public for the first time, it stood beside its master and held her hand. 5 free gifts stood before the council. 5 living beings who were supposed to be mute instruments, but they were not. The Archon with the white beard looked at them, then at Verena. Then he said an investigation was needed, that a trial was needed, that time was needed, but that a voice had been heard, and that it could not be silenced. Verena was taken into custody that very evening, not for murder, not yet, for abuse of authority. The investigation began. Ethan stood on the steps of the high tower. Evening. The sun was setting. 2 moons were rising, one white, the other blue. Sora stood beside him, silent, with blades at her hip, with the face of someone who had finally found her place. Ashley sat on the steps, city guard uniform, insignia on her sleeve, the first female guard without a gift. Maeve stood with a notebook. She was taking notes, everything, every word, every name, every moment. Her gift remembered it all. She was writing it down, just in case, because paper is more reliable than memory when it comes to history. Lina stood next to Ethan, shoulder to shoulder, a mark on her cuff, as always. She looked at him. She asked what to do now. Ethan looked up at the sky, then at the city stretching out beneath the tower, at the rooftops, at the streets, at the lights in the windows. He said it was time to go home. They had a bakery. The bread wouldn't bake itself. Lina smiled. Cyrus stood next to Ethan, not inside, beside him. His ash-blonde hair in the evening light, gray eyes, no contempt, no sarcasm, no defensiveness. He looked at the city, at the world that, for the first time in history, had heard the voice of the gift. Then he looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at him. Something passed between them that didn't need to be said, because their bond conveyed it better than any words could. But Cyrus spoke, out loud. He said, "Thank you, Ethan." Ethan looked at him, at the young man with ash-blonde hair who had emerged from his chest 2 years ago and left to train because he couldn't stand his lazy master, who had despised him, who had taught him, who had protected him, who had eaten bread and wept light, who had remembered the dead prince and the knife in his back, who had taught the thief to fight and made the inquirer cry, who, for the first time in his life, had fallen asleep on a human's shoulder and been afraid of it. Ethan said, "You're welcome." Then he paused. Then he said louder, "You're welcome, Cyrus." Cyrus smiled, a small smile, warm, genuine. They stood on the steps of the tower, 6 of them, and 2 gifts, under 2 moons, in a world that had just begun to change. Not by revolution, not by war, not by a throne, by bread, by a voice, by a name, by the right to eat peaches and argue with the master without risking being torn apart into ingredients. Ethan Carr, a former student from Seattle who'd planned to look around for a week, stood in a strange world beneath strange moons, and for the first time in his life, he knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. Not because they'd chose him, not because he was the strongest, because he was the one who asked Dar, "Are you hungry?" and didn't look away when Dar answered. 2 years had passed. The bakery had become a refuge for people whose gifts were awakening. Kaide's song heard the voice of her gift for the first time. Ashley became the first guardian without a gift. Maeve gathered evidence of Prince Cassian's murder. The group traveled to the capital and presented the case to the Council of Archons. Cyrus testified before the council as an individual for the first time. Varan was taken into custody. An investigation was launched. For the first time in history, the gifts were granted the right to vote. Ethan and his men returned home. Cyrus thanked Ethan, without sarcasm. The story ended not with a victory of force, but with a victory of the voice.